cleaner boy said right, but Joe had left the blueprint, and the old word still had teeth. So ExmoJoe just smirked and said, watch me drag him back beneath. Keys in hand, heart on fire, back through the audit trail. If the story gets rewritten, then the truth will never fail. I'm just in time, I'm just in time. I'm bringing back the one they tried to hide. I'm just in time, I'm just in time. Watch the cover up get left behind, 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 behind. Whoa. They swapped a shining Jesus for a safer little frame, a later day invention with a friendlier sounding name. But the book still kept the echoes, and the lectures held the line. So I'm flooring it through history for the Jesus they let die. Tires scream, the clock bends low, 1835 ahead. If the saints want polished fiction, I want the living words instead. I'm just in time, I'm just in time. I'm bringing back the one they tried to hide. I'm just in time, I'm just in time. Watch the cover up get left behind, 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 behind. Back through the dust, through the papers, through the edits and the seal, past the last day final shuffle, past the version they could wheel. I've got one hand on the wheel now, one hand on the flame, and I'm not asking for permission, I'm just calling out his name. I'm just in time, I'm just in time. The original is stepping into light. I'm just in time, I'm just in time. No more buried truth tonight. I'm just in time, I'm just in time. I'm bringing back the one they tried to hide. I'm just in time, I'm just in time. And I'm not stopping till he's right inside.
We got our own Huey Lewis in the news, guys. Guys, if you know, you know, right? Back to the Future, American Psycho. We don't have time for the references. So, weird week. Let's get to it in a second. Today, we're going to be talking about how Mormon apologists like Jacob Hansen, well, it is dark in this. I'm going to be correcting this while I do this. Jacob Hansen and others have been defending Mormonism's doctrine in front of Christians who they have to explain in ways that aren't going to offend anybody. Good luck. That Mormons are Christians, just not quote unquote creedal Christians, and that a critical part of that, is that better? A critical part of their having not been creedal Christians, all Mormons are not creedal Christians, meaning that they don't believe in any creeds, which in Mormonism, I'm trying to get a good exposure here, you guys. Sorry about that. In Mormonism, that's like a huge brag, right? That's like bragging rights. It's like, oh, we don't believe in the Nicene Creed. We don't believe in any of the conventions and the ecumenical conventions and so forth, which I can say that goes back a ways in Mormonism. And really what made Mormonism interesting from the beginning was the fact that they defied convention when it came to Christianity. And Joseph Smith, frankly, had a lot of contempt, for for. Christianity of his day. Well, I don't know if you saw this. Maybe I'll try and bring it up here. I did do a recording of this. I don't know how good it is. I don't feel like the recording came out very well. They're trying to defend, this puts them in a position with the Christians to debate consubstantiality. I'm just going to show you a little clip or two if I can find where I saved it. Of this, some coverage of this very debate going on. This is All Those in Favor, which is a Mormon apologist channel that reviewing the Jacob Hansen debate, apparently with Allie Beth Stuckey, whatever, Stuckey, whatever. This is it.
To respond to that, the gift of grace. So that's his analogy, and this is her response.
So our view is that our repenting, being baptized, which is where we make this covenant with Christ, opens us up to receive the gift of the Holy Ghost by the laying on of hands by those who have authority. And then basically at that point, we're in a covenant relationship. We've taken his hand. And the only question is, are we going to hold on? Are we going to continue to place our faith in Jesus Christ and seek to follow him?
Okay, I have a couple of things on that because I don't want to quibble about Arminianism versus Calvinism with you because I think our differences are.
She's like, I don't want to acknowledge that you agree with most of Christianity on this.
Yeah, I mean, any concern or question you have, I don't really, I think there are bigger things we can talk about, like what I want to talk about.
A little bit bigger and more fundamental, but
These boys are super mature. Okay, Mahanre.
I will say, yes, according to Ephesians 2, we are dead in the trespasses and sins in which we once walked. We follow the prince of the power of the air, which is now at work in the sons of disobedience. That's what Ephesians 2 says, that we are spiritually dead. Dead people can't reach. Dead people can't clean themselves up. Dead people can't say, please, God, help us. A dead person has to be revived. And so.
Can we just talk about how insane this is?
We cannot. So, boring. In any event, it goes on like that. It goes on and on and on and on like this. So I didn't even get the really good part about this. But basically what they're covering and what Jacob Hansen has been in the unfortunate position of having to defend now, but in front of Catholics, in front of Protestants, and now with this Baptist, very, very, very powerful, influential, frankly, Baptist influencer on the Blaze. Does Glenn, someone catch me up? Does Glenn Beck not even own the Blaze anymore? Is that not a thing? How does I don't know. How does this prominent Mormon have to do with this? Anyway, Allie Beth Stuckey person. Anyway, to no avail. But he has to keep explaining how it is that Mormons don't believe do believe in God the Father and God the Son and the Holy Ghost being one in purpose, which is the current church LDS church doctrine. Don't get me wrong, but in three separate persons that are not consubstantial, and that's where we get into what I have touched on before. Now, when we talked about this last time, I talked about how when you read the Book of Mormon, published in 1830, you get the idea very clearly that Joseph Smith's book, the Book of Mormon, you've heard of it, advocates and argues for a son who is consubstantial with the Father. They talk about the condescension of God in Lehi's dream and in the very first book in First Nephi. And then it goes through to Alma's preaching, which is almost exactly taken, several passages taken from St. Paul. There's and all of these other ones. I did miss, as far as I can recall, this scripture. So I wanted to update that before we move on to the rest of this story as I see it. And then if we have time, I'm going to update you guys on a couple of things to do with the Tim Ballard story that's developing, how it is that Chief Mitiga yesterday published our godless hymn, Look Up, yes, with my permission, on his channel. And we started talking and it's actually going pretty well. I just, while I was coming on this program, just got off the phone with David over at Zion Media. My life is strange right now. I feel like things are finally coming together on some of these contacts, but I think I'm finally getting close on some of this story having to do with how Tim Ballard is more connected than we thought into, Epstein world, whatever. So this is, but I wanted to share with you, and if we have time and if he shows up, we may be playing gracious hosts in a few minutes to a man who claims to be a prophet of God. So if he takes my invitation that I've made several times now, I invited him and said, look, here's the link. You show up, we talk about it. We will be cool, man. And we will be cool. Doesn't mean we just let people just say whatever they want. But I think it's exciting to learn about what the restoration movement is doing now. In any event, here's something interesting from the Book of Mormon, if you want to talk about creedal Christianity. All right. This is Mormon, chapter 7. Oh, excuse me. Victory for Satan, chapter 7 and verse 7. This is Mormon 7:7. And he hath brought to pass the redemption of the world, whereby he that is found guiltless before him at the judgment day hath it given unto him to dwell in the presence of God in his kingdom, to sing ceaseless praises with the choirs above, unto the Father, and unto the Son, and unto the Holy Ghost, which are one God, in a state of happiness with which hath no end. So, while a lot of apologetics in Mormonism have tried to play up that this is the difference between Mormonism and other doctrines out there, for those and other Christians, including both Catholics and Protestants, I will point this out. There's plenty of things in the Book of Mormon that stand out to call out Christianity, call out Catholicism, call out Protestantism, call out Calvinism very specifically. Jesus being consubstantial with the Father, frankly, is just not one of them. According to the Book of Mormon, however, Joseph Smith is another thing. Yes, it's true that Joseph Smith, towards the end of his life, did start to teach that God the Father and God the Son were possessing of separate physical bodies. But it's very key to point out, as I have done before, that between the publication of the Book of Mormon in 1830 and between a group of revelations in the last year of Joseph Smith's life, 1843 to 1844, so you got 14, practically a run of 14 years, where that's just not the way Mormonism understood the relationship between the Father and the Son. Now, maybe there's some evolution in there. You have the Book of Abraham. You have this idea about Kolob. You have ideas about the resurrection, the baptisms for the dead, that are all evolving the Mormon doctrine on the concept of the continuity of souls into eternity, and how God is, God has a role for all of his children in this. But it's not until you have the advent of polygamy and you have Joseph Smith dealing with infighting and enemies coming at him from all sides in Nauvoo, Illinois, that suddenly you have Joseph Smith thinking eschatologically, but thinking like the end times, like it's the end of the world, and like he's going, like he is living to see everything come crashing down all around him. And lo and behold, big shock to everyone, in 1844, he is killed in Carthage jail. So I want to go back, though, to that early Mormonism, that exciting Mormonism that got people really into Joseph Smith and his movement. Last time we talked about how the Book of Mormon, as we saw in this example in Mormon 7:7, don't say Mormon. That's a victory for Satan. So Mormon. Chapter 7, verse 7. And that we see that the idea of God the Father and God the Son and God the Holy Ghost being one in every way that is similar to the Nicene Creed, it is exactly the same. But why would somebody then, I want to show you why it is that somebody who, if I were still a Latter-day Saint, if I were a believing Mormon today, and I wanted to explain why it is that the lectures on faith and the Book of Mormon teach about the consubstantiality of Christ, of God God the Son with God the Father, I would go to the New Testament, specifically Joseph Smith's translation of the New Testament. We talked about this a little bit in another podcast about the joining comma. Let me throw that up there. Let me get rid of these videos. You videos. All right, here we go. Share screen. I want to go ahead and pull up the Bible. You guys remember the Bible, don't you? This is 1 John 5 KJV. And we're going to be looking at these verses right here. 7 through 9. Everybody see? I'm just checking to make sure that everybody can see. Cool, cool. All right, good, good. It reads, this is 1 John 5, 7 through 9. For there are three that bear record in heaven, the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost, and these three are one. And there are three that bear witness in earth, the Spirit, and the water, and the blood, and these three agree in one. If we receive the witness of men, the witness of God is greater, for this is the witness of God, which he hath testified of his Son. Blah, 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 blah. Bible, 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 right? Now, one of the greatest things I think about the Book of Mormon is this passage, as I have said before, where it says that in the last days, men will say, and let's be clear, I, Joe the ex-Mormon, atheist, am convinced that this is Joseph Smith talking, not some ancient Nephites. It says, in the last days, there will be people who say, a Bible, we have a Bible, and there can be no more Bible. And as far as that is concerned, I think Joseph Smith is actually echoing the criticism of deists of his day, particularly Thomas Paine, but and in so much as he is doing that, Joseph Smith is right on point. I will say, defending Joseph Smith and early Joseph Smith against the Mormons and against everybody else, Joseph Smith's right. This whole concept of the Bible being a closed canon that has absolutely nothing to tell anybody about a modern world and cannot be updated with any modern scripture is absolutely absurd. If God can talk to people in their time, in ancient times, there's no reason why he would close the canon, after the book of Revelation, which, by the way, as any scholar will tell you, is not even the last book of the Bible written. And there are several books that, frankly, should be in the Bible and are not. As far as I'm concerned, it's just a crime that the Shepherd of Hermas isn't in the Bible. It's absurd that Nicodemus isn't in the Bible. It's ridiculous, furthermore, that the ascension of Isaiah is not in the Bible. Why these apocryphal works are not in the Bible is absurd, especially when people say, well, we don't know who wrote them. Do you know who wrote Mark? If you say Mark, I might clunk you over the head. Do you know who wrote Matthew? You say Matthew. I mean, seriously. Who wrote the books of Moses? If you say Moses, I swear. Anyways, I'm not really aggressive like that, but obviously the books of Moses were not written by Moses. This would have shocked Joseph Smith, who thought that they were, obviously. But and we see that again and again. Joseph Smith was as widely read as he was, and his mother did say that he was widely read, that he had a broad exposure to literature in his day, and I think that's quite important for people to remember when Mormons say, well, Joseph Smith, he had a third grade education. Wait a second. Joseph Smith was a reader. And we know now, thanks to the Mormon Church, thank you, Mormon Church, and particularly Terrell Givens. I remembered your name this time, Terrell Givens. Thank you, Terrell Givens. We now know that Joseph Smith actually read quite deeply, at least in the Nauvoo era. He read quite deeply into subjects of theology because we have the list of the books that he donated to the Nauvoo Library when they started a Nauvoo Library. So whether he read them or not, we know that Joseph Smith was at least in the possession of books on history and on biblical theology. We know that he quoted from Josephus. He must have had access to Josephus. And we know that his father was given a copy of Thomas Paine's The Age of Reason. I mean, and that before the publication, the drafting and publication of the Book of Mormon, and a lot of the things that are addressed in the Book of Mormon, criticisms of religion in Joseph Smith's day and in the Bible are actually directly mirrored out of Thomas Paine's The Age of Reason, which frankly is one of my favorite documents ever. In fact, right now it is canonized in the Church of Korihor as actual scripture, godless scripture. So we're the Church of Korihor. You can donate to the church. We certainly appreciate money. You can also give to our missions. You just go to the give button when you get to the korihor.org. Anyway, but I wanted to show you a little something interesting. Okay, so after the Book of Mormon was published in 1830, then in 1831, Joseph Smith is sitting around drumming his fingers going, okay, I published a new book of scripture that corrects the false teachings of the Bible. Cool. Except there's still the Bible. And now people are already saying that we believe in this gold Bible and not the actual Bible, but we believe in the actual Bible. Of course, we believe in the actual Bible. We just know that it's not translated correctly into English and or not translated correctly in general. And on that point, again, notes Joseph Smith. That's true, that part about the Bible not being translated correctly. There are huge errors in the book, in the book we know as the Bible, including this Johannine comma that I just showed you. Those verses were not in the original manuscript of First John. Whoever even wrote First John, we don't know who that person was, like most books of the Bible. So we have these we have this passage that we know with almost absolute certainty is a forgery. It is added by Creedal Christians to justify the consubstantiality argument of the Nicene Convention that was meant to contradict the Arian heresy. If you don't know, there's this guy named Arius who believed that Jesus was not born the Son of God, that Jesus inhabited the Logos when he was baptized in accordance with the commandments of the Father. And that, you remember the scene where supposedly John the Baptist says to his cousin Jesus and says, I have need to be baptized of thee, and comest thou to me? And Jesus says, suffer it to be so, that all may be fulfilled. That is the moment. And then this dove descends upon him. According to the Arian heresy, which is still exists in some prominent minds throughout history. And I actually did a lot of reading this week about one of the most interesting minds in Christianity to buy into this idea of the Arian heresy, of the ideas of Arius. Some of the most prominent thinkers in the history of Christianity secretly believed this idea that Jesus was not born divine. And that means that the idea of the Immaculate Conception, completely unnecessary, that the idea of the Mary as the Holy Mother and that she could be venerated and so on and so forth, and as the Madonna, has a special place regarded of being holiest among women, that this is all just BS that came out of the Nicene Convention by a small handful, we don't know how many, of bishops and Christians who believed that Jesus had to have been born divine. And as John 1:1 says, that in the beginning was the Word, the Logos, which is the will of God, the mind of God, the intentionality of God, the breath, the literal utterance of God in the universe. And that utterance inhabited a man, and that man was Jesus Christ. There have always been, throughout the history of Christianity, little pockets of heresy, people who stood up to say, well, if you read the documents and you go to look at the history of the documents in the Bible, this Arian heresy, it actually makes a lot of sense. And then you have these other people, but then you have this prevailing sentiment. We can only guess why it is. It seems to me convincing that Constantine wanted there to be an idea that the Holy Mother was holy, and that her holy son, her holy child, who's prophesied to return, is born holy and is born a god, because Constantine probably thought that he would be cast in the role of the return of Jesus Christ, and that his mother, whom he loved very much and whom he definitely and who was definitely a conniving woman, that they would become gods in the eyes of the Christians. I feel like that didn't pay out as they had hoped, if that is their intention. And who knows? Who knows any of this? But in any event, after that, they had to keep the momentum going as saying, well, the difference between us and all these other Christians, and this is a key difference, that that the Orthodox Christians didn't necessarily buy into this. Certainly the Gnostic Christians didn't buy into this. This was a very, very uniquely Catholic doctrine up until the Reformation, and then it became Catholic and Reformation. Idea that Jesus was consubstantial or Homoousious. Mentioned this before. I repeat things sometimes. You've heard the phrase, it doesn't make an iota's worth of difference. An iota is the letter I in Greek. That is because Arius taught that Christ was homoousios with the Father. Homo meaning same, ousios, stuff. I meaning homoousios. And the whole point of the Nicene Creed that came out of the Council of Nicaea was to take that iota and take it out of there and say not homoousios, homoousios, not of the same stuff, but the same stuff, the same stuff, and when that gets that, and so in the actual Greek, it said Christ homoousion, or of that same stuff with the Father, which then gets translated through Latin into English as consubstantial, of the same stuff, of the same substance. And that's where this idea came from. And it's all being sold through a handful of passages, none of them quite so directly as the Johannine comma, which again, we know with some certainty to be a forgery. And now here's the thing. 1831, Joseph Smith sits down, says, next project. Takes his boy, Oliver Cowdery, who's been his scribe while he's looking in his hat, translating the Book of Mormon. And he says, let's do the Bible. You think they've ruffled some feathers with a gold Bible to answer the Bible. What if we just go in there and say, well, this Bible is mistranslated. Everybody knows that it is. That was widely, believed at the time and understood at the time, whether or not everybody believed it. It was well understood as be one of the criticisms of the Bibles, that it was not translated very well, and that there was a lot of politics involved in translating it. And so he said, let's go in and just correct it. And so began the process of what became the inspired version, also known as the Joseph Smith translation, started in 1830 through 1831, and then over the course of mostly 1831. And in the summer of 1831, Joseph Smith switched scribes over to Sidney Rigdon. I forget exactly what it was. He had Oliver Cowdery working on some other project, or maybe I think it was when he sent Oliver Cowdery to he sent Oliver Cowdery back to Missouri or something. I forget the exact historical context, but in any event, he starts using Sidney Rigdon as his scribe, and he and Sidney Rigdon go in and correct the New Testament. They work on the New Testament over the course of that summer, including John, 1 John. Now I want to show you the correction as they made it. I'm getting messages because I'm going to Arizona tomorrow, and people are trying to make sure I'm updated on what's going on there. Okay, so I'm going to stop that screen. I'm going to start this screen. The inspired version of the Bible. Here we go. And you've heard of the King James Version. You've heard of the ES version. You've heard of the NI version. This is the I version. You are looking at the inspired version of the New Testament, the inspired version of the Bible according to the Community of Christ. This was published by one of Joseph Smith's, I believe his great-grandson, Israel Smith, back in the 1950s. And this is that very passage we were just looking at with 1 John chapter 5, and we start in verse 7. For there are three that bear record in heaven, the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost. And these three are one. Come on, computer, keep up. And there are three that bear witness in earth, the Spirit and the water and the blood. And these three agree in one. If we receive the witness of men, the witness of God is greater. For this is the witness of God, which he hath testified of his Son. In other words, it is word for word exactly the same. Now, if Joseph Smith didn't believe in the consubstantiality of Jesus with the Father, why did he leave in, while correcting the mistranslations of the Bible, why would he leave in the Johannine comma? Once again, this is between the Book of Mormon and Lectures on Faith, both of which teach the consubstantiality of the Son and the Father. And in the Lectures on Faith, which was included in the Doctrine and Covenants, Mormon scripture, all the way up into the 20th century, was, in fact, when it says Doctrine and Covenants, what we have now in Doctrine and Covenants is the covenants. Lectures on Faith was the doctrine. That was Mormon doctrine as it was originally. Was these lectures written and given by Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon, who were also the guys working on this translation of the Bible. Now, the Mormon Church has said for a while, we don't know who delivered which of Joseph Smith or Sidney Rigdon, actually gave these individual lectures on faith. So we don't know that they may be corrupted with Sidney Rigdon's opinions and ideas, not just Joseph Smith's prophetic ideas. But that seems to me like pretty lame argument, given that, once again, this consubstantiality with the Father is consistent with both the Book of Mormon and also with the inspired version or Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. Now, that's 1830, 1831, up through 1835. Joseph Smith lived another 9 years, and over the course of those 9 years, his ideas about God changed. But we're given to understand, if the Mormon Church is correct in its story now, that the one true version of Joseph Smith's first vision story is that in a grove of trees in 1820, a 14-year-old boy knelt in this grove of trees, confused about which religion to join. Not accurate. But and then asked God, praying out loud. I have to keep translating from Spanish because I spent 2 years teaching this story in Peru. That's why I always think of it in love and voz alta. Anyways, that he saw above him two personages whose glory and description defy all, no, whose brightness and glory defy all description. Oh, translating back from Spanish. Okay, it says specifically now on the Mormon Church's website, as we went over before, I'm not going to pull it up again because I don't have it pulled up already, that in the 20th century, the Mormon apostle James E. Talmage specifically called out that because Lecture 5 of the Lectures on Faith says specifically that God the Father is a personage of spirit and not a physical being, that was inconsistent with Joseph Smith's theology at the end of his life, which maintained up until current days the theology of the Brighamite Church, with the exception that for a while there they were actually teaching the Adam God theory, which is this idea that Brigham Young came up with, that actually God the Father was inhabited upon the earth as Adam, the first man. Didn't quite catch on, kind of an embarrassing thing, swept under the rug, not correlated into the future of Mormonism. So don't bring it up, I guess. But to this day, pretty much the idea of Joseph Smith at the end of his life, which is the same time period in which we get this version of the first vision, with God the Father and Jesus as two separate beings appearing to Joseph Smith in that grove of trees when he's 14 years old. That's this revised history. The earlier versions are not quite so explicit in that. They are much more about that that God had told Joseph that he was saved from his sins and so forth. Those were the earlier drafts, earlier versions of his first vision. So obviously, Joseph Smith's personal theology evolved over the course of his life. But what's interesting is that the all of Mormonism and all of its documents started to evolve this idea of God over the course of his life, and especially condensed down into the last couple of years of his life, when all of a sudden Joseph Smith started throwing out all kinds of wild doctrines here and there. In fact, so many wild doctrines that we have people today who believe that some of them were made up. I don't really buy that, but I suppose it's plausible. I wanted to introduce you to one of those. So one of these ideas was that Joseph Smith never really recognized his, because now they have to deal with this. Okay, they can explain lectures on faith. I should finish that. That because lectures on faith, lecture 5, says that God is a personage of spirit, and that didn't jive with the Book of Mormon and the rest of Joseph Smith's theology, that it was proposed by James E. Talmage to take all of the lectures on faith and 86 them. Oh, I didn't say the lectures on faith. I didn't say anything. I didn't. We're cool. We're cool. We're cool. Get rid of those. Get rid of the lectures on faith. And so that's what they did. And again, even the church's website today says so that they didn't have to deal with the problems that rose from Joseph Smith having maybe taught that God the Father was also God the Son. But then you have this problem with the inspired version. In addition to the fact that the inspired version basically belonged at that point to the RLDS church. Joseph Smith retranslated the Bible, and yet the official version of the Mormon church on the Bible up until very recently is the King James version. Why isn't it the inspired version? That's a curious thing, a story for another day. But I wanted to show you why that's particularly intriguing, is because I'll tell you this story, part of the story. Yeah, I'll explain it to you this way. So there's a guy named John Bernheisel. John Bernheisel was a good friend of Joseph Smith's, and he came to Salt Lake City several years after Joseph Smith had passed away, after Joseph Smith was killed in Carthage, and Carthage, Illinois, and brought with him a book that he had made while in Nauvoo, a year after Joseph Smith had died. He went to Emma Smith and said, "Can I have the manuscript of Joseph Smith's of your husband's translation of the Bible?" And she said, "Yeah, sure. Well, whatever." So she lends him the entire manuscript of Joseph Smith's translation of the Bible, which, by the way, is not published anywhere. It's just kind of it's just to have. Just it's a copy just to have, right? It's like learning about Xenu in Scientology. It's like, well, we're gonna have this. It's just to have, right? And so she's like, "Yeah, you can borrow it." So he takes it, and he takes a book, a journal, and he goes through and he copies line by line all of the changes to the Bible that Joseph and Sidney Rigdon made in 1831. And he takes that copy, gives the document, the original manuscript, back to her. Allegedly, that copy they gave back to her becomes the inspired version published many years later in the version I just showed you, where the joining comma is word for word exactly as it is in the King James version of the Bible, meaning that they believe that Jesus and Jesus and the Father are consubstantial, that they are of the same essence, same stuff, which, as I understand it, the Community of Christ actually still does believe. In fact, I'm pretty sure that even the Biggertonites believe this. Pretty much only the Brighamites, as far as I know, believe that Jesus, the Father, and Jesus as God the Son, and the Father, Elohim or Amen, as God the Father, being separate, physical, resurrected, once mortal beings who now, having attained the resurrection and perfection and exaltation, pretty much just the Brighamites, and pretty much just to sell polygamy. and which was their unique selling proposition. We're polygamists. So, in any event, when John Bernheisel comes to Salt Lake City and brings Joseph Smith's translation of the Bible with the Johannine comma intact in his version, several of the brethren who receive him, who were Joseph Smith's friends as well, stand up to testify. While it is wonderful to have finally in our possession Joseph Smith's translation of the Bible, we do want to testify that in the end, Joseph Smith did feel that the Bible translation was incomplete and that it should be revisited. Fair is fair. That is something that they had testified Joseph Smith had said. But in any event, this is the John Bernheisel manuscript, sort of. Let me show you. Where is this? Boom, boom, boom. There we go. Okay. So I should clarify. To the best of my understanding, what this actually is, the actual John Bernheisel manuscript is in the church's vaults somewhere. It has been spirited away. Somebody who knows better, please let me know. I would love to know. My understanding is that this is actually taken from Daniel L. Daniels' fair copy of John M. Bernheisel's copy of Joseph Smith's new translation work, followed on pages blah, 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 with Joseph F. Smith's and Orson Pratt's reports on comparisons of the Bernheisel manuscript. Very important. So Joseph F. Smith was an elder, a member of the Quorum of the 12, I believe, at this time, and he is the church's historian, rather controversial historian. And Orson Pratt, I believe, is the one who actually testified that Joseph Smith did want to spend more time on his translation of the Bible and never finished it. So basically, as I understand it, that's the reason why they decided to have a separate copy. So they keep one copy in the archives and then copied the rest of it by hand. Again, if anybody has reason to change Joseph Smith's translation of the Bible at this point with the Johannine comma intact, it is these brethren, because their doctrine is that if the Bible, wherever the Bible insinuates in even the remotest of terms that God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost are one in substance in any way, that it is incorrectly translated. So this is the place, if you're going to slip it in and say Joseph Smith always knew that this was not doctrinal, this is the place to be sneaky and throw it in. And yet we see here the first epistle general of John, and you see the verses, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, and you see the changes in the entire 5th chapter of 1 John. The entire 5th chapter of 1 John, the changes 13 to include the words continue to believe instead of just believe, and verse 18, and to include continueth not in sins and keepeth and overcometh him not. Or in other words, once again, didn't change a single word of the Johannine comma. So you have now 3 of the fundamental documents. I do read the Twitch chat. I just don't read it a lot of chat while I'm actually going. But yeah, sorry about that, friends. I'm here. This is a live thing. Can I pick a song? Yeah, John. What would you like to hear? Sorry, guys. In any event, I am here, and we're going to get to the chatty part of this, and then maybe we'll have Tim joining us here in a moment. Bet you never heard of a prophet named Tim. We're going to have one plausibly here very soon. As a matter of fact, I should pull up my Facebook in case he's trying to message me. Okay, so there's one. All right, so maybe John Bernheisel, actually preserved the document the way it was for Joseph Smith in 1831, because Joseph Smith believed in the consubstantiality of the Father and the Son. But where did it change? And this is where we're going to get to the part where I'm going to make to you the case. If I were still LDS, this is how I would defend it. And it's going to be a little strange, but I'm going to put to you that it makes sense. I share screen again. I want to show you a little something else. Which of these is it? Let's do this one. Okay. So what you're looking at here is in the Joseph Smith papers. Anybody who wants to follow along, you go ahead and put into your search field josephsmithpapers.org : well, I would put in instruction to April 1843. That should do you plenty good. Page 37. And you can follow along at home. Okay. So this is William Clayton's account of a revelation that is now recorded in Doctrine and Covenants of section 130. Just so I can clarify, this one for you. Do I have that pulled up? I do. Surely I do. Okay. So in case you're not aware, this is the scripture, Mormon scripture now, it says that when the Savior shall appear, we shall see him as he is. We shall see that he is a man like ourselves. Okay, so we're getting some pretty controversial Christology. And that same sociality which exists among us here will exist among us there in the second coming / resurrection. Only it will be coupled with eternal glory, which glory we do not now enjoy. John 14:23, the appearing of the Father and the Son in that verse is a personal appearance, and the idea that the Father and the Son dwell in a man's heart is an old sectarian notion and is false. Huh? Wait a minute. That deliberately and directly contradicts the Book of Mormon, the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible, and lectures on faith. What are you doing, Joe? Stay consistent, brother. So that's the part where we're getting into this idea that Joseph Smith is revealing that God the Father and God the Son are separate and distinct human beings, that they are resurrected men. Where does this even come from? Well, I want to show you. This is interesting. If you look in the Joseph Smith Papers project, it has flaws, but I think it's very interesting. They actually do a pretty good job at making lots of little details easy to discover and to read about this and to discover what's actually happening here. Now, as it is in the Doctrine and Covenants that the Mormon Church publishes now, it says that this is a revelation given in Ramus, Illinois. Thanks, guys. You guys suck. If you actually read the source notes, it says Joseph Smith instruction in Macedonia, Hancock County, Illinois, on the 2nd of April, 1843. Featured version copied circa 4th of April, 1843, in Joseph Smith Journal, 1842 to 1844, Book 2, page blah, 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 blah. Handwriting is Willard Richards, Joseph Smith Collection, CHL. Something library, right? Church History Library. For more complete source information, see source note for, etc. Okay, so this is the actual document. This is one of the documents that section about God the Father, this revelation that becomes section 130. It's taken from this and at least one other document. And the actual way it's recorded by William Clayton, who is Joseph Smith's personal scribe and journalist, says, Elder Orson Hyde, this is Joseph Smith speaking, I am going to offer some corrections to you. Elder Hyde replied, they shall be thankfully received. Then he begins, when he shall appear, we shall see him as he is. We shall see that he is a man like ourselves. And that same sociality which exists amongst us here will exist among us there. Only it will be coupled with eternal glory, which glory we do not now enjoy. John 23, the appearing of the Father and the Son in that verse is a personal appearance to say that the Father and the Son dwells in, advance to page 38. A man's heart is an old sectarian notion and is not correct. There are no angels who administer to this earth, but who belong or have belonged to this earth. The angels do not reside on a planet like this earth, but they reside in the presence of God, but on a globe like a sea of glass and fire. Sea of glass before the throne, etc., where all things are manifest, past, present, and to come. The place where God resides is a great Urim and Thummim, blah, 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 blah. So this is where Joseph Smith gets into all of the weird doctrine that Mormons claim to believe today about God having a planet and then what the planet is made of and so on and so forth. Now, to be clear, a lot of this does harken back to the Book of Abraham, which is earlier. So there is a gradual evolution of the theology over time. I want to show you something else I found very interesting about this revelation. So that's William Clayton's journal. It also was recorded by Willard Richards, the guy who was actually in the room with Joseph Smith when he died. Now, I mean, that's a separate but related issue. Let me see if I have it actually here. Yeah, good. Cool. Ha, I had it right. Okay. Oh, wait a second. That was Willard Richards. Oh, damn it, Joe. That was Willard Richards. William Clayton's. Let me get William Clayton's up here. That was Willard Richards. I apologize. Now let me give you actually William Clayton's. So, share screen. All right, there we go. All right, sorry. Instruction, 2nd of April, 1843, as reported by William Clayton. The historical information, once again, says Joseph Smith, instruction in Macedonia, Hancock, Illinois. 2nd of April, 1843, featured version copied, blah, 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 blah. And it reads, PM, Joseph preached on Revelations chapter 5. He called on me to open the meeting. He also preached on the same subject in the evening. During the day, President Joseph made the following remarks on doctrine. I was once praying very earnestly to know the time of the coming of the Son of Man, when I heard a voice repeat the following. Joseph, my son, if thou livest until thou art 85 years old, thou shalt see the face of the Son of Man. Therefore, let this suffice, and trouble me no more on this matter. There's a lot of this back in these days. Don't let trouble me no more on this matter. And that's where I'm going to make my point here. But let me continue reading here because this is interesting. I was left thus without being able to decide whether this coming referred to the beginning of the millennium or to some previous appearing, or whether I should die and thus see his face. I believe the coming of the Son of Man will not be any sooner than that time. In correcting 2 points in Elder Orson Hyde's discourse, he observed as follows. The meaning of that passage where it reads, when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is this. When the Savior appears, we shall see that he is a man like unto ourselves. And that same sociality which exists among us here, blah, 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 the same as it is in the other versions. So in other words, all of this doctrine, first of all, this whole idea that God the Father and God the Son are separate beings, it's all part of the failed prophecy of Joseph Smith that within 85 years, that by the time he turns 85 years old, he will see God's face. So Joseph Smith was born presumably on December 23rd, 1805. So that would be December 23rd, 1890. Well, I don't know if you heard, but Jesus did not come back in 1890. But like a good prophet of God, he puts in this little catch that says, I was left thus without being able to decide whether this coming referred to the beginning of the millennium, meaning the second coming, or to some previous appearing, meaning exactly that, or whether I should die and thus see his face. I believe the coming of the Son of Man will not be any sooner than that time. Now, as I have said before, so first of all, whenever we see prophets talking as if they are prophesying about the end of the world, almost always we're seeing a time of great emotional distress. among these people. Yeah, I bet you were right. That there was that this is a time when Joseph Smith, he's seeing everything fall around him, right? So this is 1843, if you don't know. Joseph Smith knows he's coming up on the end. He has gone through the entire 1838 Mormon War in Missouri. He's been tried for treason against the state of Missouri and effectively at that time also against the U.S. Constitution. And he is now actively having to defend himself legally in court, operating as the mayor of Nauvoo, taking over the courts and making decisions that start to exonerate himself of legal crimes, of legal actions since the death of Elias Higbee. Well, especially once Elias Higbee dies, which is around this time. And Elias Higbee is a judge, a Mormon judge, that used to sign off to help Joseph Smith get out of legal trouble. And so now he's doing it for himself. And it's got to be, in my opinion, around this time, it's got to dawn on Joseph Smith that he's running out of friends, especially because this is at the same time that John C. Bennett starts to raise a ruckus about the fact that Joseph Smith is the originator of the polygamy doctrine and not him, and that everything he did in connection to polygamy, John C. Bennett seems to be, for the best that we know and can determine, John C. Bennett was an a-hole. He was a creep. He was a womanizer. He was a violent man. He was a trafficker. He was abusive in every way that you can tell, as far as I know. And around that time, I think it's very plausible for any Latter-day Saint, if they were a believing Latter-day Saint, to say this man represented a serious lack of judgment on Joseph's part, because Joseph Smith made him a member of the First Presidency. Joseph Smith made him one of, he and Joseph Smith basically raised the Nauvoo Legion, which is really the way that Joseph Smith is able to avoid being extradited back to Missouri, was because he controls the court, he controls the city council, he controls the city police, all by virtue of his being the mayor, but also because he's got John C. Bennett, the first mayor of Nauvoo. That's exactly right. Because he's got John C. Bennett in his pocket, and John C. Bennett has drafted the charter for Nauvoo. John C. Bennett is his man on the inside in the Illinois state government. John C. Bennett is the connected man who represents Joseph Smith's protection in the courts, Joseph Smith's protections in the city, Joseph Smith's protections from the police with the police, and he represents Joseph Smith's protections, his political protection, and all of his political ambitions, because as we know at this time, Joseph Smith is already planning and plotting how he is going to run for president of the United States. So at that time, though, Joseph Smith and John C. Bennett are both going around practicing spiritual wifery. And when Emma Smith finds out about it, she is greatly dismayed, as are the saints, because all of the brethren at that time have been signing documents, and all these women who are alleged to be Joseph Smith's other wives are being approached and asked to sign documents in good faith, saying that that all these rumors about my being married to the prophet are not true. They're not true. They're not true. And yet they are true. They are lying. And all of this is to cover their backs. Well, Joseph Smith, eventually, Joseph Smith figures that John C. Bennett is taking advantage of his connection, his closeness to the prophet, and realizes this guy's going to get me killed. And that's when we see stories about Joseph Smith approaching William Marks at one point and telling him, I think I've been deceived when it comes to spirit wifery. He starts to recant on polygamy. At the same time, all of these people around him I've started to practice polygamy. Brigham Young is practicing polygamy. His brothers Hiram and William are practicing polygamy. I'm not sure about Samuel. I think Samuel was practicing polygamy at the time too. He's got several of the apostles practicing polygamy, and ultimately he has his own wife sold on polygamy. Finally, he has Emma sold on polygamy, and he's created a whole new distinct order within a secret order within the church known as the Quorum of the Anointed. And in the Quorum of the Anointed, not only are they believing and practicing polygamy, they're even ordaining women to the priesthood, because when women would enter into the original endowment, and as it is now in the endowment, they are ordained, and it says very specifically that they are kings and queens, priests and priestesses to the Most High God. In other words, as far as they are concerned, this is an ordination to the priesthood. And so we have all of these core doctrines of what would eventually become the temple endowment, greatly modified, at least as far as we know. All of that is associated with this end times prophecy where Joseph Smith is talking about how he is going to be and how they are all going to be in the next life after they die. This is the time when Joseph Smith is more or less becoming more and more convinced that he is going to have to that he is turning his back on John C. Bennett, that he may have to turn his back on some of his closest friends, either one direction or the other, either the ones who adhere to the practice of polygamy or the ones who don't. And it does seem, if the confrontation with William Marks is in any way true, where Joseph Smith tells William Marks that who is one of the anti-polygamy people, is the stake president at the time, and he appeals to him, you have to help me fix this. It does appear that Joseph Smith isn't sure how he's going to handle the new doctrine. In the midst of this, Orson Hyde gets up in one of these meetings and gives a prophecy about the end of the world. And in that prophecy about the end of the world, he declares that in the end day, God the Father and God the Son, as we read in the Bible, will both emerge upon the earth, but in incorporeal form, which again is consistent with God, with the story of Lectures on Faith, also consistent with the Book of Mormon, also consistent with the Bible, including Joseph Smith's translation of the Bible. So it's everything that they've known in Mormonism up until this time. And Joseph Smith stands up and says, no, I'm going to correct you on that. In the last days, God the Father, and we will see Jesus as he is, meaning that he is a man. And then he gets into this idea, the old idea, because Orson Hyde, who was an apostle, has given up and given this prophecy stating that, well, in the last days, we will all live with God in our hearts, because God doesn't have a body. That's the only way that he can reside in all of our hearts. So this idea is not Joseph Smith trying to correct old doctrine from the Bible, or, the consubstantiality of Christ with the Father, as it is in the Nicene Convention or anything. He's trying to correct Orson Hyde. He's trying to correct and rein in people in his own day and age, and in his own organization, and emphasize to them, look, if we're going to make it to the end times, and you're going to see me again, and we're going to see each other after whatever comes out of this conflict that's going on right here, if we're all going to be reunited again, you got to stick with Brother Joseph. Joseph is your man. You don't go to William Marks. You don't go to William Law. You don't go to Emma. You don't go off with Sidney Rigdon. You don't go off with any of these other people. You don't go off with Oliver Cowdery, whatever he's doing. Your man is Joseph Smith to the end. You remember how this all started with Joseph Smith. It's going to be Joseph Smith. You don't follow this guy, Orson Hyde. Love him dearly. Love his wife even better. But you don't go after him. You're Joseph Smith's man to the end. All of you say it. And he pulls this narcissistic crap. Not long after that, about a year, within the next year, Joseph Smith finds himself in jail, charged with treason, not wearing his garments, his brother not wearing his garments, and he and John Taylor also not wearing his garments, all in this jail, getting drunk as a skunk, and singing a poor wayfaring man of grief because they're crying in their beer because they're so depressed as they realize the end has finally come for them. Okay. And then the mob arrives. If I were still a Latter-day Saint, this is how I would make it. I would justify it. I would not double down on this idea that what makes Mormonism unique is this idea that God the Father and God the Son are separate corporeal beings and that God resides on a planet called Kolob. I would let that go and say, you know what? Those are things Joseph Smith said. But there are things Joseph Smith says and then things Joseph Smith says. And the idea that God does not allow anybody to lead the church astray without taking them from the earth is not a one and done lightning proposition. We saw it, for example, with Martin Harris and the 100 or the the pages of the Book of Lehi anyway. 112 pages? Somebody will remind me. Okay. We saw it with Martin Harris that Joseph goes and prays and God says Martin Harris is paying for this whole venture, and his wife says she wants to see the actual fruits of his labors, and God supposedly tells him, well, don't do it. You're not allowed to. No, don't let him take that. Something's going to happen to it. It's a sacred document. Don't let him take that. She can read it with everybody else. And Joseph Smith tells him several times, look, the Lord says you can't do it. And finally, Martin Harris prevails on him and God lets him do it, right? If God doesn't allow Joseph Smith to make any mistakes, even significant mistakes that affect the revelation, important revelations in the end times, if he doesn't allow him to do that without taking him from the earth, then how did the Book of Lehi end up missing? How does the Kirtland Safety Society end up being established, given that God knows it's going to fail? How does the Johannine comma wind up remaining in the New Testament when it's clearly a forgery? How do several of the mistranslations of the book of Isaiah in the Old Testament in the Bible end up being duplicated word for word inside the Book of Mormon? How do you have all of these mistakes happening in the course of Joseph's life if God takes the prophet before he leads somebody astray? The fact of the matter is, God gives him extra time to try and figure it out for himself and then send somebody else to go in and clean up the mess if he doesn't do it right. Because as we see in the story with the lost book of Lehi, God, seeing that was going to happen, allegedly told Nephi to rewrite everything that Lehi had said, but in his own words, so that when people compare them, they would be in different words later, and et cetera, et cetera. There's always an excuse. There's always a story, right? And that towards the end, Joseph Smith wasn't protected because he wasn't living according to the word of wisdom, because he wasn't living according to the covenants that he had made, never to take off his garment, because he wasn't living in accordance with the commandments to be honest with his fellow man, not to bear false witness, that he was, as we see with the lies that he printed about polygamy and so forth. He's not being faithful to his wife. He's obviously committing adultery on a mass scale. He's, that in his last days, Joseph Smith had given himself over to temptation, and that this all happened when John C. Bennett began pouring poison in his ear and corrupting his brains. And so all this comes down to a fatal mistake. The fatal mistake of Joseph Smith was that he let a wicked, cruel, and conniving man poison his thoughts. That's the real martyrdom of Joseph Smith. And that's how I would justify it. And then I would say, therefore, Section 130, Section 131, Section 132 of the Doctrine and Covenants, screw them. You don't need them. Those are all from the years and the months when Joseph Smith had obviously lost his mind because he fell to temptation. And it's a sad thing that he did. Luckily, he's got Christ to be his advocate before the Father. Let him be redeemed and let him be rescued from his sins. and let nobody make excuses for him. He was a man like you or me. He was a sinner. He did vile things. One of the last things Joseph Smith did, at least according to one or two accounts, one of the last things Joseph Smith did in this life was take a pepper box pistol and shoot a man in the face. All right. He was fallen. And luckily for us, God preserved John Taylor. I'll say this again. I'll close this up, and then we'll go on to some other stories. And then hopefully maybe we'll have Tim join us. I haven't seen Tim yet. Maybe I'll get into Facebook just to see if he's messaging me. But the reason why I find this interesting is I start telling this story to people who are still Latter-day Saints. I can see their eyes glaze over in the moment where they go, this guy's about to tell me some anti-Mormon crap. And then I stop. And I say, all right, you don't want to hear it? You don't want to hear it. But this is what I'm telling you. If I were still a believer, this is how I would work this out. Okay? If you don't want to hear it, you don't want to hear it. But this is it. I get to control what goes on my program, so I'm going to say it. Joseph Smith, in the end, how was I going to put that suit? I had it. Oh yes. Okay. Follow me along here. It was at Carthage jail. Oh yes. Okay. Some people are dismayed to learn that Joseph Smith wasn't wearing his garments and was wearing, allegedly, according to at least one account, a magic medallion, a pendant that was a gift from a woman, as I remember. That was a Jupiter talisman that was supposed to protect him. We see the depravity to which Joseph Smith had fallen in terms of going back to his old folk magic ways from before his repentance, before his moment of salvation, where he prayed to God and God told him and God told him that his sins were forgiven, and he had his basically his born again moment in the first vision, the original first vision, the first vision. And in that moment, we see that Joseph Smith was a mortal human being and a sinner, like any one of us. And for years after that, it was told by John Taylor that he wasn't wearing, that they weren't living according to the gospel standards that many Latter-day Saints come to understand later in the story of Mormonism to be the true standards. But that God took out Joseph Smith, allowed the enemies of the church to take out Joseph Smith, allowed the enemies of the church to take out Hiram, and allowed bullets to pepper the body of John Taylor. Willard Richards was another story. Willard Richards was trying to live in accordance with all the principles. He survives. He pulls John Taylor, according to John Taylor's own account, when Willard Richards was alive, I believe, when that happened even, and pulls John Taylor out from underneath the bed in the room where he's been left for dead, and moves him from the room, the comfortable room next to the cell, to the cell in the jail. They had either bribed or at least persuaded the guards to let them move from the jail cell to the more comfortable, jail house, the guard's house, the guard house, or I think it's like a debtor's prison room, and move into that other room where it was more comfortable. And so he drags him over into the other cell, covers him up with a mattress, and tells him, look, I hate to do this to you, but you're too big for me to carry you. And I think they're going to come back. So God help you. And Richards takes off and leaves him there, and then comes back for 100 years and more. This is maintained. This story was maintained by Latter-day Saints as proof that the holy garment would protect you even from a bullet, and that if it weren't, as in the case of John Taylor said that he believed that a stopwatch that he was wearing that had the church still has it on display somewhere, that a stopwatch had stopped a bullet that would have actually killed him. That God intervened. That God saw that that Joseph and Hiram both were not meant to become prophet. That they could not be allowed. They'd been too poisoned by polygamy and by John C. Bennett, and that they couldn't. That God had to take them out by allowing the enemies of the church to get them, but had spared John Taylor so that he could carry on the sacred work. And then it's John Taylor who picks up the mantle and carries on. And when John Taylor and his successors carry on the work, guess what happens? They publish the Doctrine and Covenants. And when they publish the Doctrine and Covenants, together with the Book of Mormon, they publish along with it as an important part, maybe the most important part of the Doctrine and Covenants, they publish Lectures on Faith. In other words, it is very much within keeping of the church for people to believe that the Book of Mormon's explanation of Jesus being consubstantial with the Father is completely doctrinal. And yeah, so you saints can stop stressing so much about telling the Baptists that you don't believe in the Nicene Creed. You do. You can if you want to. You just have to give up the Section 130 business. And I get it. Not everybody wants to. In any event. So that's why I would defend it. I want to tell you guys some things. Doesn't look like we got Tim in. I got a message. Okay. All right. Let me just make sure that I message the X here. Cool. All right. So interesting, right? I tried to defend the Mormons. I just don't think it has to be this hard. They could just let it go. Forgot to switch up my branding. What do you guys think? You guys interested in hearing some of the stories about what's going on with the story, etc.? Oh, I am still scheduled to talk to Myth Vision on May 6th at noon. Noon Eastern time. Let me double check. I have it in my messages with the man himself. If you guys don't know, Myth Vision is one of the most popular atheist channels that goes over mythology that's online. They have like over 500,000 subscribers. The guy there and I, Derek Lambert, we're actually pretty close. Let me just make sure. May 6th. $12 noon Eastern Standard Time. So that's when it is. Okay. So yes, Myth Vision. So I had reached out to Derek. We had done one episode way back in Christmas of 2024, where we talked about myth, and on Christmas for a Christmas episode called Merry Mythmas from Myth Vision and the Church of Korahor, and we really hit it off. So I told him, I said, hey, I'd love to do a video with you, maybe a live stream sometime, and we will talk about an interesting myth. And he's like, cool, what myth? And I said, Korahor, the atheist myth from the Book of Mormon. And he's like, I love that. I'm like, yep. So here we go. So we decided to schedule that. And then while we did that, I can do image files now. I had AI draw up a bunch of pictures of us together. I'll show this while I talk to you guys about what's happening next. But if you don't know, I had this idea when we did this episode of the Christmas episode. I said, let's dress up in Christmas sweaters, and we'll be like stepbrothers. We'll be like John C. Reilly and we'll be like stepbrothers. And he's like, dude, I love Step Brothers. And so now every time that he and I interact online, we go, hey, I'm not calling you dad. He's like, not even if there's a fire. So I came up with a whole bunch of fun ideas here. I'm going to show you some of them here. Oh, I'll remove that. Add to stage. Whoop. Sorry. So, like, here's one. I came up with that one before I came up with the let's talk about Korahor suggestion. I cracked myself up. And I said, we'll call this episode, We'll Never Be Brothers in Christ Again. Not even if there's a fire. Let's see if I come up with another one. I made so many. I had one day where I had a little bit of time and I was like, I'm just going to go bonkers with the AI generations and just create fun stuff. Let's see here. Here we go. Here's another one. It's just fun. We have a good time. So that's, if you don't know, that's Derek Lambert, me, and Korahor. But these tattoos on Korahor's arms, they're from the source picture I used for Derek Lambert. So those are Derek's tattoos on Korahor's arms, and I kind of love it. Oh my gosh, don't I have another one? Let me see here. The one I actually made and actually used, I think, is on Korahor folder. Lambert. Korahor. Oh my gosh, that's a disaster. Don't do that, Joe. Typing the word Korahor into my computer, that's it's going to be that's a search and a half. That right there. But anyway, so yes, I will be on Myth Vision on May 6th at noon. I will at noon Eastern Standard Time. So that will be. I'll still be here in St. George, which will be next week. Was that Tuesday? No, later than that. But yeah, so that answers that question. But I'll be promoting it on the here on the YouTube, and also I'll be promoting it everywhere. Now, I would encourage everybody to go find Myth Vision and subscribe to them, but I think that our agreement is that we will be broadcasting on Hellfire Agency at the same time. Just in case I get that wrong, go and subscribe to Myth Vision. They're really great. He gets great guests on there. Richard Carrier's been on there. I've been talking to Richard Carrier, by the way, about being on the show as well. Do I show you this or do I not show you this? Okay, so here's the other story that is interesting. So you guys remember this song? Let me just pull it up. I just posted it to TikTok. There's a godless hymn called "Look Up." You guys hear that? It might be chopping it up a little bit on your side. Anyway. If you guys aren't following me on TikTok, I'm Hellfire Agency now. Okay, I'm going to show you something now. We'll see if it kicks us off. So we got a guest on the show just the other day who said, "Hey," an account called Four Corns, and said, I am a Mitiga encourager." He said, encourager. He said, I sent him your episode. I think he meant the episode where I talked about Mitiga's crash out on the Zion Media servers, Discord servers. I was like, oh, really? And he said, he really liked it. Really? And he said, yeah, especially because he really liked the song at the end of the episode and was really moved by it. And I said, well, I'm glad. He's, well, welcome to enjoy it, and tell him I hope that it brings him some spiritual meaning. Look Up is a song about our our godless meditation practice that's named after the overview effect. It's called overview. It's the effect that astronauts have experience while they are looking down on Earth from orbit. And I thought it would be a great way to celebrate the Artemis 2 mission, which I think was a waste of money and time, but at least we are still doing something. Okay, so here we go. So he said, yeah, Mitiga said that he reached out to you, that he emailed you. I said, I don't think so. And then I went and I looked, and it was true. Mitiga reached out to me. And if you guys don't know, Mitiga, everybody who knows who Mitiga is, right? Mitiga reached out to me and said that this song, Look Up, is now his favorite song. In fact, he messaged me this morning. I woke up to a message from Mitiga saying, I walked outside this morning and my stepdaughter and my wife were outside working out, listening to Look Up. And he said, you have no idea. This song is a huge hit. And I was like, I said, I'm glad. I'm blown away that this has even happened. I thought for sure you were going to call me, yell at me. We have had some interesting conversations, but basically in the last 48 hours, I have had some very insightful conversations with Mitiga, including the one I said, here is the MP3 file for the song Look Up. I give it to anybody. And he said, how would you like to be attributed? I said, well, you can use it however you want. I really can't stop you. But since you asked politely, I would ask that you attribute it to the Church of Korihor or Joe Rollins, the Church of Korihor. And he said, will do. And then literally while I was texting with him on the phone, he sent me a link to this video. Let me see if I can share it. I can share screen. I can share my whole screen. It includes system audio. We'll see if it works. Okay. So you see the whole screen here, my whole screen. This is what he sent me. Dude, look at that. This is on the Branch of Peace. This is on his YouTube channel. It's got 23,000 subscribers. This channel is 23 times the size of the Church of Korihor. And this is apparently his people. And look at these comments. Of course, my comment is first. It says, I wholeheartedly approve. Thank you, Mitiga Joe. Then we have someone saying, I can appreciate why this is your favorite song. We all need to remember to look up. Love the picture. You are not alone. Beautiful song. Making music brings so much joy. When it touches people, it's my favorite thing to do. Thank you for sharing. And then we have our very own songs of our own saying, very cool. So, yeah. And I have to say, he did a brilliant job. You guys, I don't know if you guys can hear this, but here's how it sounds.
Up here, looking down on you, I wish you could see our oasis so blue. We were all born here, unsure what that means. Our petty borders and wars don't mean a damn thing. A hateful world can feels so crowded now that I'm up here all alone. I wish you all could see you've forgotten your home. Look up, these stars are just the sea. Look up, stay the course with me.
Yeah. In any event, so that's what started out a conversation between me and Mitiga, where we began to talk about his work with the Maya. We began to talk about my work with Chicano families here in southern Utah and southern Nevada. We started to talk about maybe collaborating on working with his network and mine and ours, the Church of Korihor, maybe the Branch of Peace and the Church of Korihor independently, but in conjunction, working to support immigrant families in southern Utah and southern Nevada. Maybe that's going to become a thing. Maybe it won't. We've been talking to Sumac about the possibility of coordinating a three-way call where we talk about, is it possible to do something together? I was blown away. I mean, and I had told him, I said, look, I expected you to yell at me basically. And I thought that maybe, we weren't going to be friends, but I did reach out to you in a peaceful way. I thought to try and say, look, if I said some harsh things, I'm sorry. But I'm just trying to keep our community, indigenous communities, safe. And I think you can appreciate that. If you reach out to me in peace, I will reciprocate. And so far, he has done that. And I have to say, I'm impressed. So far, my interactions with him have been, I don't believe what he claims about who he is and what his role is. But I believe him when he says he's doing it sincerely and that he's trying to do something constructive. I did happen to ask him how much he knew about the Tim Ballard story and Ken Krogh. That proved to be pretty much fruitless. I've been asking everybody. I've been in communication with Zion Media. I don't know if you guys know about Zion Media. Zion Media are the fringe Mormons that platform Chief Mitiga when, back in the day. As far as I understand, from both Mitiga and from David, why can't I remember David's? I just got off the phone with David, literally a phone call as I was getting on to here tonight, over at Zion Media. As far as I can tell, their relationship is still amicable and peaceful. They don't really platform Mitiga much anymore. He doesn't want to really have anything to do with any Mormon, really Mormon establishments, especially the LDS establishments. He's trying to stick mainly to the indigenous lodges that he's connected to. And as long as he only claims to speak for them and the ones who have actually ordained or appointed him, I told him, well, as long as you're sticking to that, and I would hope not using the Book of Mormon to justify any of it, because I think that the Book of Mormon is colonizer bullshit. Power to you. And I say, well, more peace to you then. And so I said, look, as long as you're not hurting indigenous people and I'm not hurting indigenous people, I say we'd be friends. And so far, we'll see what happens. This is not the way I plan to be reporting on how things are going with Mitiga. But yeah, but that led me down. This is about this rabbit hole. Okay. I'm going to reveal this much about how things are going with the whole Tim Ballard situation. Because I was going to do a Tim Ballard update tonight, but I haven't quite tracked this down yet. I'll put it this way. There is a story. Let me show you something. There's a story here in Utah near where I live. Stop screen on this. Near where I live when I'm in Utah. And there's a couple, a Mormon couple in Spring City, Utah, named Joe and Lee Benyon. Lee is a woman's name. Well, sometimes. And Joe and Lee Benyon are staples of the community, beloved artisans from Spring City. Spring City is an artisan community. They have galleries and they have, painters retreats, and they have this old time radio theater show. All the people in the local community come out to hear the radio theater show, and they broadcast it on the actual radio. And it's like, it's this cute little artisan town that was once a Mormon pioneer town that's still laid out in the same block pattern that was built around the Nauvoo Plat, where they, builds in a perfect grid, and, so that the streets are straight and everything. And so it's this Mormon town where you have all these people, these, old Mormon families who now make arts and crafts and sell them and have these fun shows. And it's a place where it's a little bit warmer than Utah County. I think it's technically Carbon County, might be Utah County, southern Utah County. But it's just this quiet, sleepy little town, Spring City, Utah. My parents didn't even. I asked them, how far is it from here to Spring City, Utah? It's 3 hours. And they said, what is Spring City, Utah? Never even heard of it. Right. This is a little tiny Mormon pioneer town out in the just off the beaten path. And my parents are from Utah. And Ken Krogh lives there. Ken Krogh is the guy who was head of the Spear Fund, which came out in support of Tim Ballard when Tim Ballard was ousted from Operation Underground Railroad following all the accusations from all these women and his supporters. I know what I'm going to show you. Meanwhile, let's see if I can find it here. So Ken Krogh is there, and so is this couple, Joe and Lee Benyon. Joe and Lee Benyon have had to get an injunction against this guy, Ken Krogh, who also, if you remember, do you remember there was a conference that happened in Salt Lake City back in 2023, I think, where Tom Harrison, who is Spencer from the book Visions of Glory. That's the book that Lori Vallow had underneath her bikini thigh when in Hawaii, when the police came and confronted her and Chad Daybell and asked them to and gave them an order to produce her children who were dead at that point. And they were off vacationing, partying out there because she is a resurrected sex goddess, and she has to be where resurrected sex goddesses go. So they went to Hawaii to get married after, allegedly, I guess officially we can stop saying allegedly, after they murdered their actual spouses and married each other in a totally non-suspicious way. And that guy, Tom Harrison, who wrote the book that they were living, that they came up with all of this stuff by this, reincarnation and, multiple moral probations, this off the beaten path, weird Mormon doctrine. That's all based on some ideas by various strange fringe Mormons over time. This guy, Tom Harrison, started a company called Eternal Core. And they were going to train up a whole bunch of people in doing what he did in his spiritual prophecy work and treating and working with people apparently with addiction and so forth. If you don't know, Tom Harrison worked with, he was a psychologist who worked with children who were victims of sexual abuse up in at Primary Children's Hospital in Salt Lake City when he went in for an MRI one day, and when they injected contrast into him and the woman was telling him, look, you're going to look for these following signs of anaphylaxis, if any of them happen, if any of this happens, if you experience any of this, I need you to signal to me that it's going on, so we know that you're not allergic to the contrast, which is, I understand it is mainly iodine. And so she's injecting the contrast into his blood vessels, and he claims he signaled to her, yeah, I'm experiencing that, the shortness of breath, the warmth, the thing, the all of that. And then he claims that she just kind of stared at him like she didn't know that he was, like she didn't care that he was suffering, just kept plunging this contrast into his veins, and that he died. And while he was dead, he traveled throughout the hospital and had conversations with the furniture, where she, the nurse who was injecting him with the contrast, was having sex with the doctor on staff, and both of them were married. And the furniture started to cry out to him about how the very atoms and the souls of the creatures that were involved in the producing of this leather couch or of this wood table cried out to heaven for the pain that they were forced to be involved in bringing pain into the world through adultery, as the doctor wrote love notes to her on his desk, and they had sex on the couch, and all this stuff. And he's having conversations with all the furniture in this building, and then he transcends onto this other plane, and he sees all the world, and he basically sees the end of the world. And if you think that sounds like a good idea, that this sounds compelling, you would do well in the Tim Ballard, Chad Daybell, Lori Daybell, Ruby Frankie, Jody Hildebrandt, etc., Mormon fringe movement, because Eternal Core had all those people there, except for Chad and Lori Daybell. I think they might have been there. It's just never been confirmed. They weren't one of the speakers, but Tim Ballard spoke there. Jody Hildebrandt spoke there. Apparently, Ruby Frankie, I think, spoke there. All of these people were speaking there, and it was insane. Basically, they were all there as part of this Mormon cult within the church, with a cult within a cult. And they still have followers. They still have a lot of followers. Anyway, so this guy, he claims that he came back from the dead. He came back from this near-death experience where he died, and then came back to his body, revived, sued. I don't know if he formally sued them, but he accused the hospital of killing him. They produced all the materials showing this guy is overreacting. He didn't even come close to dying. We gave him contrast, and he passed out. And he was fine the whole time. We got an MRI. People do it all the time. And and he didn't go into anaphylaxis. He didn't die. His heart didn't stop. He didn't stop breathing. His brain continued to function the whole time. We've got all the information. We got it all here. Turns out he drank too much soda, and he kept getting bladder infections. He kept getting yeast infections in his bladder. And they're like, you need to stop drinking so much soda, and you need to get more exercise, and you need to get up to pee when you need to pee, and take this antibiotic, and you're going to be good. You're going to be fine. And and that was it. That was the whole thing. Well, that book, that story becomes Visions of Glory, and there's like a whole cult, a whole movement around it. Anyway, in any event, this guy, the guy who was president or head of Eternal Core, and the guy who was head of Tim Ballard's Spear Fund, is one guy, Ken Krogh. That guy is the guy who claims that he has collected. He and others have collected. Oh, I should clarify the rest of this guy's story in case you're new and you haven't heard the guy's story. Ken Krogh's story, as I recall, is that he was driving up the I-15 to Utah County, and he got into a car accident. And this car accident, he suffered a severe traumatic brain injury. And in this traumatic brain injury, consequence of which can happen, basically he had kind of like a sundowner effect, where part of the day when the sun would go down, he would look at CSAM. You know what CSAM is? It's dirty, dirty, illegal things involving children. He was looking at that material, and he was addicted to it, couldn't stop. And so he reached out to Tom Harrison, allegedly, who was at that time no longer a practicing therapist, had stopped working as a psychologist and licensing as a psychologist because he was teaching these off the wall spiritual therapies that are not recognized and are not copacetic with the standards of the American Psychological Association or any governing body at all. And so he basically started working as a life coach, teaching these and practicing like these gay conversion therapy type of therapies, including quitting porn. And so, and he's had a thriving business apparently doing this. And all these people apparently are joining this we're joining this company, Eternal Core, to become a part of it, become like practitioners of it or something. And then in the process, they were also raising donations from these people for Operation Underground Railroad. And Tim Ballard was speaking at his events because Tim Ballard would have everybody read Visions of Glory at Operation Underground Railroad, allegedly, and tell people all the time that he was personally connected to Tom Harrison. In fact, as we know from the lawsuit from Celeste Boris, which is now defunct, but we have the materials, and in there she got into Tim Ballard's emails, and she revealed that he had an email from Tom Harrison, who was Spencer in Visions of Glory, saying basically that, you know, from your other special blessing you got from another prophet, allegedly, President M. Russell Ballard of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, that you're going to become the next senator for the state of Utah. And from there, you're going to become president of the United States, and you're going to get called to be an apostle, and you're going to become the prophet of the Mormon church, all of the same life. Wow. What a brilliant life ahead of Tim Ballard. If he can only get out of this, human trafficking business, anti-human trafficking business. And so, and this connective tissue between him and Tom Harrison, besides the fact that he allegedly would, and this is just allegations, that he would do ketamine trips in which he would use the ketamine as a portal to connect through to his spiritual advisors, including Jesus, Nephi, who apparently we're to understand that Nephi is his grandfather, not the prophet Nephi from the Book of Mormon. Apparently we had that wrong, all of us. But I mean, how are we supposed to know? I mean, what? Apparently Nephi represents his grandfather or something, some relative who has gone on. But then he talks to Tom Harrison, who is not dead. I can't stress this enough. Who is not dead? He is a living man on the earth. He lives like here in southern Utah, as far as I know. I mean, I think he actually lives over here, near me in St. George. So it's like this guy's having visions about like the end of the world and all this stuff, and he's converting other people to it. So it's this cult within the cult. So I totally get why it is that the Mormon Church eventually said, we're going to excommunicate this guy. We can't do much about President Ballard believing in this, in all this kooky nonsense. But this guy we don't have to keep. This guy we can get rid of because he's been lying to us, obviously, for a long time. And so they ordered the excommunication of Tim Ballard. As far as I'm concerned, Tim Ballard suspects that's what happened. I think he's right on this point. I think he's right. I think they actually did send down a hit order saying, get this guy out of our church. And I don't blame them. I do not blame them. That totally makes sense. But this guy, Ken Crow, keeps coming up. Well, okay. So I told you there's this couple, Joe and Lee Benyon. Joe and Lee Benyon got an injunction, I guess is the order. They got a court order against this guy Ken Krogh, saying stay away from him, because to stay away from these people, you're making them uncomfortable. Apparently, he's been working marshaling the city council, because he got put on city council last year at Spring City, Utah, specifically trying to undermine this development community where they're building housing out there. They're building housing with like more than single family housing. Basically, they're building worker housing in Spring City, and he doesn't want that to go forward. I still haven't established why that is. But I have established a few things. Let me see if I can open this up here. I started into this. Well, you know what? I'll save that one for another time. But let me show you this. Yeah, open this up. Okay. Just this last couple of weeks, if you go to, let me actually pull it up over here. Sorry. If you look up American Crime Journal, John Lines, that's Jon, lines as in lines on a page, deposition, you're going to find a very interesting document. My friend and one of my informants, one of my what do we call it, collaborators, I guess, on some of my work, is this guy Damian Moore, who has worked with Lynn Packer in publishing some of his information about Operation Underground Railroad. Let me see if I can find an actual shareable link. Well, anyway, I'll just show it to you. Share screen. And he went through the laborious task of going through this deposition from January this year with John Lines. If you don't know, John Lines was one of the top executives at Operation Underground Railroad. And if you scroll down here, and you'll see who's in the room in this deposition. Now, this is a lawsuit involving Tim Ballard is the plaintiff. His attorney, Mark Eisenhut, we've talked about him before. Remember where I showed you the guy who stood up and defended Tim Ballard in the lawsuit with Kelly Suarez? That's this guy, Mark Eisenhut. And then for the defense, you have these two attorneys whose names you will see frequently again and again turn up. They are Suzette Rasmussen with All Utah Law and Alan W. Mortensen from Mortensen and Milne. They are there to represent, as I understand it, Amy Davis, who accused Tim Ballard of sexually assaulting her. And he is suing her, I believe, for defamation. And the people who are and the person they're there to depose is John Lines as a witness. John Lines is the person, is just about the most top person to come out against Tim Ballard in this organization, apart, I would say, from Celeste Boris. I mean, like, this deposition, as I go through it, I keep finding more and more damning stuff. Don't worry if you're curious. What you're going to look at this and say, this is not an actual deposition. This is an index. Yes, it's an index, which breaks down line by line what you're looking for in the entire document. Like, they have laboriously gone through summarizing, like, SWOT findings are withheld out of fear of Ballard's reaction. Line states that the results of the SWOT analysis, that strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis, were not shared with Ballard. Basically, they did a SWOT on him, on whether or not Tim Ballard was an asset or a liability based on his behavior. or the board, because leadership believed Ballard would react aggressively. In other words, they didn't even tell him that they had done this. They put together a formal process of figuring out whether or not whether Tim Ballard was an asset to the company. He explains that the findings were effectively shelved and not acted upon due to fear within the organization. Internal culture described as toxic and protected by board structure. Lyons states that the organization operated in a toxic environment driven by fear of Ballard, and that the board structure, which he describes as largely connected to Ballard, allowed him to operate without meaningful oversight. In other words, this is King Tim. King Tim's kingdom. He can do whatever he wants. It's all his sandbox. He explains that employees felt frustrated because they believed in the mission, but saw leadership as a hindrance. Basically, because the board, it's like if you ever look at what's going on with the whole Operation Underground Railroad thing, say, where was his board of directors? They apparently were on board with it all. That's the way. That's at least what John Lyons appears to say. Just make sure that. Let me just make sure this light doesn't quit on me. Oh, sorry. SWAT results believed to still be traceable despite not being implemented. Lyons states that although he does not recall the consulting firm's name, the SWAT analysis and its findings should still exist. He expresses that he would be interested in whether the donor was ever informed that no action was taken. Lyons identifies Paul Hutchinson as an early operational concern. Lyons states that Paul Hutchinson was one of the first individuals brought to his attention as problematic. He explains that Ballard used Hutchinson in operations and described him as a major donor, but Lyons was told internally that Hutchinson had not actually donated funds, which is news to a lot of us. A lot of us went, "Wait a minute, what?" The whole thing was supposed to be that that Paul Hutchinson didn't want any of his money going to apparently he just brought the money in. He didn't necessarily, apparently, according to John Lyons, he didn't actually put any of his money in, of his own money. Lyons states Hutchinson had no law enforcement or undercover qualifications. Lyons states that he learned of operations through social media rather than internal channels. It's news to him. Lyons describes Hutchinson linked activities as social behavior rather than legitimate operations. FBI agent informed Lyons that Paul Hutchinson was under investigation. Lyons states that shortly after joining OUR, an FBI agent contacted him and asked him whether he knew Hutchinson. He explains that the agent indicated Hutchinson was under investigation and associated with Operation Underground Railroad. Lyons states Ballard identified Hutchinson as one of his operatives. Lyons states that when he asked Ballard about Hutchinson, Ballard described him as one of his operatives. Lyons explains that he immediately raised concerns about legal exposure for the organization. So it goes on like this. It's basically they have gone through and taken this very long deposition and all of its damning details and indexed it so that you can see quickly what which section you're going to go to if you want to actually go to and read the deposition, which when you get down to the bottom of the page is there for you to download. It's a 54-page PDF document, and it is holy shit juicy. Oh my gosh. I mean, just the wildest stuff. I mean, it's like pick a line, right? Here we go. Question: you mentioned that he brought up praying with his wife and spiritual making decisions based on spiritual feelings. Was that common that he brought up religion and spiritual decision making? Mr. Eisenhut: objection. Misstates and misinterprets prior testimony. By Miss Rasmussen: was that something that you encountered frequently, John? John's answer: absolutely. He would always invoke some type of divine guidance that he was relying on. In fact, it was very distracting that anytime anybody opposed or countered or somehow questioned or challenged his ways and decision, he would always invoke, well, I received revelation to do that, and that's the way we're going to do it. Even if it was absolutely terribly unsound. And I had no problem saying, Tim, I beg to differ, but that's not going to be good. But that's not going to be good for the organization. It's not going to be good for the strategic plan. It's not going to be good for the things that we're trying to accomplish. I mean, you just go through it. I mean, it's all pretty bad. You can take any line here. And how did OUR leadership respond to your concerns? Let me preface this by "this was not just me. This was just not me. This was finally a culmination of enough was enough. We were getting external pressure from people saying that we've got academic groups, we've got significant other nonprofit organizations, we have people, we have law enforcement, we have the FBI was conducting an investigation. Was conducting an investigation at the time about fraud and some of the claims and the misrepresentations and the potential for tax violations, improper use of funding. These were all things that were coming to a head from certain sources that I was receiving and other people and myself. Anyways, some of the interesting things that I found actually kind of heartbreaking to read is a woman named Tevye Ware. Lines identify as individuals involved in operations. Lines references individuals including Tevye Ware and others involved in operations and communications, indicating their roles and coordination and messaging within the organization. That's early on. You'll notice there are 28 mentions of Tevye Ware. Lines identifies Tevye Ware as CFO responsible for financial control and resource allocation. Lines explains that Tevye Ware served as chief financial officer, controlled funding and resources, and worked closely with him in allocating funds for operations and programs. Lines states that he was aware of sexual harassment allegations raised by Tevye Ware against Tim Ballard. Lines states that he was aware of some allegations involving sexual harassment raised by Tevye Ware, describing her as capable and credible, and explains that she approached him regarding difficulties occurring within the organization. Lines describes Tevye Ware raising internal concerns about workplace issues involving Ballard. Lines explains that Tevye Ware privately approached him to discuss problems occurring in the office related to Tim Ballard, indicating that concerns were serious enough to be raised internally but not resolved. Line states Tevye Ware described Brad Damon as physically inappropriate in the workplace. Brad Damon was one of the other prominent leaders in OUR. Lines explains that Tevye Ware told him Brad Damon would try to hug her and that she did not want physical contact. Lines says Ware described Damon making her uncomfortable, and that Lines told Ware she had the right to refuse any unwanted contact. Line states that Delilah was not rescued by OUR. Line states that Delilah was not someone OUR rescued. He explains that Delilah had been subpoenaed to testify before Congress and that she was later brought into the matter through Tim Ballard, Tevye Ware, David Jacobs, and others. If you don't know, Delilah is the story. Basically, when Tim Ballard winds up, as I understand it, Tim Ballard winds up going before going before Congress and going to the White House and to present to the Trump administration a girl who had been trafficked and had allegedly been rescued from trafficking that they referred to as Delilah, if this is the one that I'm thinking of, and that they ends up meeting with instead with President Trump with Ivanka Trump of all people. And anyways, but that she'd been sold to the world as if she was one of the girls, one of the people rescued by OUR, and she wasn't. It was just well known. It was just it got some investigative journalists dug into this, and they figured out pretty early on this woman was not rescued by OUR. They just told her they could get her in front of Congress to testify or get her in front of the White House. And then they just made up the rest of the story. Let's see here. Line states Tevye Ware helped get Brad Damon fired after workplace complaints. Lines explains that Tevye Ware brought concerns about Brad Damon to his attention, including issues involving women in the workplace. Lines says Damon was later fired and that he worked under Lines at OUR. Line states that he and Tevye Ware discussed harassment by Ballard and that Ware was angry that nothing had been done after she reported concerns. Line says Ware told him she had been harassed by Tim and that the organizational leadership did not meaningfully respond. Lines explains that Tevye Ware was widowed, emotionally fragile, and deeply affected by both alleged harassment by Tim Ballard and what she had witnessed in Haiti. Lines says he respected her and viewed her as a wonderful human being. Lines states that Tevye Ware attended an operation in Haiti that she did not initially know she would attend. He says Ware witnessed an operation involving a Haitian child and believed something was wrong with how it was being handled. Lyons explains that Ware told him the Haiti operation appeared orchestrated, videotaped, and repeated for effect. Lyons says Ware believed the child was not a real victim and that the event was staged to create footage. They tell you this is the juice, man. This is it. It's all here. Now, again, this is just a deposition taken under oath with a person who worked closely with Tim Ballard at the top of Operation Underground Railroad and apparently allegedly is blowing the whistle. And it's only one perspective. I'm trying here, guys. I'm trying. Line states that after Ware raised concerns about Haiti, Ballard became enraged, accused her of lying and mental illness, and tried to undermine her credibility. Line says Ballard used the same types of accusations against others who challenged him. Lines explains that Tevye Ware reported concerns about Haiti to Kelly, who was chairman of the board at the time. Lines says he and Ware later spoke with Nathan Richardson, who told him Ware's report was one reason Ballard believed Ware had to keep quiet, had to be kept quiet. Lines states that Ballard wanted Ware kept quiet because she knew all types of things, quote unquote, including what happened in Haiti. Lines says this fit a broader pattern of Ballard trying to silence or discredit people who knew damaging information. Lines explains that Janet Russin was known to him as Tim Ballard's psychic, that she provided psychic guidance before Lines arrived. Janet Russin, by the way, is a devotee of Tom Harrison, and as allegedly, and apparently, as I've heard, she was also President Ballard's psychic. I don't know if that's true, but that a prophet, seer, and revelator needs a psychic, that's curious. I suppose, does he not know what prophets do? I mean, explains that Janet Russin was known to him as Tim Ballard's psychic, that she provided psychic guidance before Lines arrived, and that Tevye Ware told him Russin was paid through OUR's payroll. I better validate that this is true. The thing that makes this curious for me, okay, here we go. Line states that Tevye knew about a Haiti trip or operation, but he did not know it was contemporaneous with an operation. Someone will have to look this up and validate it for me because I get a lot of information mixed up in my brain. This part may not be true. From what I understand, Tevye Ware is Tim Ballard's sister. I don't know if anybody can validate that for me. She was close to, and she's a member of the family. I know that. I'm pretty certain I remember that correctly. I may be getting that wrong, but from what I recall, I think she is actually Tim Ballard's sister. And she's the one raising the alarm, going, there's sexual harassment happening all over the place. These operations like the one in Haiti are being completely staged just to get video. And then when she's the one apparently to confront Tim and say, all these people are here because you promised them that they can save kids and it's not happening. And that's when he started to sabotage her and berate her. And apparently, I'm not sure why it's mentioned that she's widowed, but apart from, unless it is that, as I believe, she was recently widowed, like she was a grieving widow and in extreme emotional distress and being, sexually harassed at work and afraid to bring anything up about it at the company that Tim is running. And it's weird. It's a weird thing. So yeah, so there's lots of information. Again, that's American Crime Journal. You'll want to look up OUR John Lyne's deposition. That's JON, like short for Jonathan. Lines is in lines on a page. Deposition. It's fully indexed there, and you can actually download the deposition. As if I remember correctly, it was January 6th of this year that this deposition was taken. Pretty cool. They're doing good work over there at American Crime Journal. Always have been. It's a big. I can't stress this enough. None of this we would know about if it weren't for Lynn Packer. Frankly, a lot of the stuff that I've reported on about the whole situation with Ted Bundy and Laura Amy, we wouldn't know about without Lynn Packer. Lynn Packer has been doing the groundbreaking investigative journalistic work here in Utah since the 70s. And pretty remarkable guy. And the fact that he and Damien worked together on projects, I mean, that's how I found out that American Crime Journal even existed. It's a pretty basic website, and it's got a little Patreon button where you can subscribe to support Damien and his work. I highly recommend that everybody do it. Sister-in-law. Thank you, Hyde. Yeah, that Tevye wears his sister-in-law. So it's Tim Ballard's sister-in-law. This is pretty saucy stuff, man. It's this whole thing. So this is the reason why it became. Oh, that feels weird. This is the reason why that became intriguing to me this week. Not sure how much of this I want to reveal. I have it on the rumor mill that if Ken Krogh is not actively involved or directly or indirectly involved in Zion Media's expansion and their projects, that is news to some people who have been disaffected from Zion Media. I contacted Zion Media. I have it from at least one person. I'm one important person at Zion Media that they have no idea who Ken Krogh is. So it's just rumor mill. And the reason why it's interesting is this. So recently there's this there are these podcasts and so forth that have come out about SRA. If you don't know, SRA is satanic ritual abuse, particularly sexual abuse. And if you remember the satanic panic, it happened in the 80s and 90s. Mormonism had its own one here in Utah, and it was pretty significant. A lot of that was reported on in the Pace Memorandum. The Pace Memorandum was named after Glenn L. Pace, who apparently was assigned by the church strengthening the membership committee, who were prominent leaders in the church, mainly made up of apostles in the church, to find out how real the claims were. He was at that time, he was the presiding bishop, or in the presiding bishopric. I think he was the presiding bishop of the Mormon church, just kind of like a separate but important leader in the church hierarchy, but not one of the brethren, not one of the apostles. So it's kind of like he gets to be kind of like a dirty man. He gets to do some of the dirty work jobs, some of the dirty jobs. And so he got assigned to go and interview people who claim to have been witnesses to seeing like babies being drained out of their blood and sacrificed, and like people being violated in satanic rituals involving and surrounding organizations that are known, one of which is known as the LDS Church of Satan. And police couldn't find anything. That doesn't mean that it wasn't there. For years, I mean, this guy, Glenn Pace, for whatever reason, became convinced in this memorandum that he issued back to the brethren that they kept secret, but eventually was leaked to the press. Somebody inside the church hierarchy took this document and leaked it to the press, and it basically said that he believed the victims, that the things they remembered witnessing in these satanic rituals had actually happened. Now, a lot of these, from what I understand, were from these repressed memories that surfaced from people using hypnosis or recalling things they had seen in dreams and things like this. And there's a whole controversial scientific question about how memory works, and that overwhelmingly, as I understand it, and I am not a neuroscientist, neuroscientists agree there's no such thing as repressed memories that can be resurfaced using hypnosis or dreams or any of that kind of thing, especially where drugs are involved, especially like alcohol or psychedelics. If your brain enters into a fugue state where it stops recording, it stops recording. It doesn't restore it in a separate bank that you then recall later. And that's why date rape drugs are so freaking dangerous, because when somebody gets roofied, or when they get given, or they get fed ecstasy or special K when somebody assaults them at a certain dosage, or even alcohol, as I understand it. And I may be getting that wrong, but that's what I understand anyway. That is that as you see if I can that down a little bit, is that as you come down from it and recall that this encounter happened, that this assault ever happened, it doesn't mean these people weren't assaulted. That's not what it means at all. Somebody gives you a drug to make you forget what happened, chances are something pretty dirty and awful happened to you. But coming down out of it and coming out of it, your brain starts to plug in the gaps in your memory. If you lose time, you lose time. And if you lose time, your brain can start to fill in what happened there with details. And we don't discuss this often in our society because, of course, it gets used to accuse people who report being assaulted as having made it up, or as having imagined it, or poor fool you, blah 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 blah. But where it involves drugs like psychedelics or alcohol, you always have to account for the fact that some false memories can be planted. Even if hypnosis, there's some theory that when you are under hypnosis, your brain can become so suggestible. I mean, this is the basis of why hypnotherapy is supposed to work, is that your brain enters these theta brainwave patterns where it becomes so suggestible that you can write new thoughts, write new memories, write new impressions. This is the whole basis behind hypnotherapy, which is disputed whether or not that actually works. I've done it, and I got a lot out of it. If it works for you, it works for you. That's all I can say. But as is the case when people use psychedelics on purpose, the benefit that you get from using psychedelics on purpose is that you can rewrite what's going on in your brain. You can channel it and use it at a deeper level to rewrite the story going on in your brain. And that's what memory is. So it's very plausible that people hear or see or consume material, even very young people, without realizing it. Lots of times it's in the media. Sometimes it's in, conversations they overhear from adults. or some of it may be archetypal. We don't know how this comes about, but similar stories come out of people who have had the same experiences or who report having the same experiences. Now, does that mean that there is no such thing as ritual abuse? No, I'm not going to say that that doesn't happen. I'm not even saying that it didn't happen in the case of these people who've reported it. I'm not saying that. I perfectly happy. What? Running back can crowd financing? Yeah. So this is where I'm going. So this organization that is claimed to exist. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm just saying I have my doubts about the organization, especially when the claims get made about it, because people report getting to a certain place where there were apostles present or prophets, and there were, nobody's allowed to say anything. Nobody's supposed to talk about it. Supposedly half the leadership of the Mormon church is involved in this LDS Church of Satan, and they're all involved in these debaucherous acts and things like that. And it seems strange that the only people who experience it don't remember everything about what happens until somebody tries to help them to recover these experiences through dreams, through or through hallucinations and so forth. Is that a family of young people reporting from Spring City, apparently, on this abuse, this SRA abuse happening, identified two prominent leaders in their local congregation, Joe and Lee Benyon, a couple that again makes pottery in Spring City and has a kiln there, that they are the leaders of the church, of the LDS Church of Satan, and that they remember as children being brought to be abused and a special ceremony, a special kind of temple underground, I think, or something around on the Benyon's property, and that they were forced to watch as victims were fed into the kiln where Joe Benyon hardens pottery, like Auschwitz style, and are burned alive in sacrifices to the devil. And okay, it's just wow. Okay. Again, I don't want to say I don't believe victims. I say believe the victims, but verify. Number one, is that even possible? How is it possible? Is it possible nobody knows about it? Who are these victims? How did these people just disappear? How did it come about that they disappeared? And then you go and look at this man's workshop in this kiln that he has, and I'm looking at from what I have seen in like video interviews, and I'm like, cremated a whole person in there, even like a small person, really, in that kiln there. Okay, okay, believe but verify. I mean, seems strange. But Joe and Lee Benyon have now managed to get a court order saying that Ken Krogh and this community and the people in this community need to stop showing up to their pottery studio and protesting, shouting, and accusing them of Epstein Islanding little kids and sacrificing them to the devil. And it's like quite a thing. Yeah, if you got good information for me, I'd be happy to talk. Message me on Facebook. I'm going to propose to you that you message me on Facebook. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm Joe Rollins. In any event, so I don't know that there's any juice behind this accusation that that Zion Media is involved in it. I had heard. I mean, I've talked to now at least two people. I've talked to really three people involved at Zion Media. who all claimed they didn't even know who Ken Krogh was. I in those 3 conversations I've had with these 3 people, they didn't know where Spring City, Utah was. They did not know who Joe and Lee Benyon were. They don't, but they are currently Zion. The reason why I looked into it and started talking to them was recently Zion Media started to cover Gordon Bowen. Now, Gordon Bowen is another case. Gordon Bowen is a very highly connected advertiser for the Mormon Church. He has a long history of big advertising connections. He ran President George H.W. Bush's failed reelection campaign. There's even an article in the New York Times that says that they joke around the George Bush reelection campaign, saying that nobody can make it onto President Bush's short list for Supreme Court nominees unless he runs them by Gordon Bowen first. Gordon Bowen apparently he was apparently in charge of rebranding campaigns for American Express and I think at least 1 or 2 airlines. So he's an ad man. He's a Mormon advertising man, very big here in Utah, and apparently very connected in getting the Olympics brought to Utah. Very closely connected to Mitt Romney. Also, there are pictures of him with prominent Mormon officials like Gordon B. Hinckley. And word on the street is that he and M. Russell Ballard and I believe President Nelson were very closely connected, very, very connected people. In fact, when the Mormon Church had their logo that we grew up, those of us who were kids of the 80s, and we had this logo that would say, "The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints." Apparently, it was Gordon Bowen, they say, that came up with the redesign that everybody was stoked about. I was stoked about because they had it on the missionary name tags when I went on my mission that would say, "The Church of" across the top, and then Jesus Christ. And then Latter-day Saints underneath. Apparently, the word is that was Gordon Bowen who did that. And then apparently consulted with the church recently when they changed their logo to feature the Christus inside of a tablet shape, like the Holiness to the Lord tablet on the temple. And then the Church of Jesus Christ. In case you didn't know, we worship Jesus Christ. We put Jesus Christ twice. So don't say Mormon, say Jesus Christ, and it sounds so nice. You say it twice, say it again, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. And apparently that was Gordon Bowen that did that. Well, once again, you have these people, you have these young people who were young once, as we all were, who have come forward accusing him of being connected with David Levitt. Gordon Bowen being connected with David Levitt, who was, again, a psychologist, a therapist, who became like a life coach and started using spiritual healing to promise people that he could help them quit the gay or help them to recover from porn addiction. Sound familiar? Tom Harrison? Sound familiar? I've been trying to expose people about this whole porn addiction thing here in Utah for a long time. This is total bullshit. I'm sorry. Did I say Levitt? David Hamblin. Thank you. You know your stuff, Axeman. Who are you? Who are you? We should talk. Who are you? Thank you. David Levitt is another one who's interesting story. David Levitt, I'm glad you called that out. I was definitely gonna get myself a cease and desist over that. But David Levitt is a whole other case, man. These Mormons are crazy, dude. Anyway, so David Hamblin was a therapist who became a life coach and began promising people he could help them quit the gay, allegedly with Gordon Bowen, who it is said, had the gay, allegedly. That he could help him quit the gay by having sex with David Hamblin. And it would transfer out of you. You got the gay? Just bottom for me for a bit, and I'll take it right out of you and knock that gay right out of you. Like, just like Jesus used to say. Is he really, brethren? What would Jesus do? I don't know. I don't think Jesus was real. Who knows? If Jesus were real, maybe he was a freak. In any event, but so the question becomes, once again, do you believe what actually happened to these victims? I say, first of all, lead off with believe the victims. Don't necessarily believe all the details, because if you are on drugs, you are on drugs. And apparently, as I understand it, all of the situations where people are remembering things that happened with Gordon Bowen when they were young involved that they were given something to make them forget what happened. There are not many reasons I can think of to justify why a person gives drugs to a child to make them forget what happened. So, regardless of whether the details of what they remember happening are true, that right there is reason enough to go, hold up. If this can be shown somewhere that there were sleepovers that happened at Gordon Bowen's house that involved these children coming over, and they remember getting given something to make them forget, and David Hamblin is involved in the story, and so much of the details about David Hamblin are panning out as that he does teach these ideas and these concepts that could be being used by people associated with him to, victimize innocent people. There is at least some reason to say they should look into it. I mean, it shouldn't be written off. And so, why should that be different from Joe and Lee Benyon? I'm not saying it should. But what I'm saying is the specific claims being made about Joe and Lee Benyon involve things that seem pretty easy to suss out. But who knows? But in any event, Ken Krogh does appear to be actively trying to prevent them from participating in some kind of project involving installing new housing in Spring City and growing the city, and at the same time obsessed with the idea of accusing them of running the LDS Church of Satan. If it's true, it's going to be the biggest scandal of all time. I'm going to reserve my judgment as much as possible, but I just don't buy that it has to do with Satanism. Now, abuse happens in the state, and ritual abuse, it's always happened. Look at the FLDS, look at the LDS Church, look at polygamy. This has always been a part of it. Sex has always been a part of it. Abuse of young people, it's always happened in this state. It's happened since the beginning of the Mormon movement. It started in 1830 with Joseph Smith's missionaries going out among the Wyandot Indians, carrying a revelation from Joseph that they were to marry the young daughters, the squaws to start claiming land on reservation land. We even go back. Dan Vogel talks a lot about this. Or talked at one point about how the revelation that we know now that says that they should establish Zion in Missouri in the borders by the Lamanites, that originally had said within the borders of the Lamanites, who are the Indians. And then it's like, but then when they got there, they got approached by the Indian agent, which is the early days of or before the Bureau of Indian Affairs. They're approached by the Indian agent saying, "You white men can't just come in here and move on to tribal land." And they're like, "No, it's fine. We're adopted into the tribe because we've married these young women in the community." And he's like, "I don't care." And they're like, "Well, we're just missionaries. We're just here preaching the gospel." And he's like, "Do you have a license to preach the gospel?" And they're like, "When in America do you need a license to preach the gospel?" And he's like, "If you're in Indian territory, you need a license from the agent. And I'm the agent, and I say you don't have a license." And then all of a sudden, the revelation was scratched out. Instead of within the borders of the Lamanites, was within the borders by the Lamanites. And so then they moved this is the place monument, is nowhere near, just like this is the place monument is not near the temple in Salt Lake City. Well, this is the place for the original Zion. Was like, this is the place. What's that? Oh, we can't, not here. Are you sure? We're married to we're not supposed to do that. Am I married in New York? No. What business is that of yours? We have a revelation that says that we can marry as, we'll go over there. You know what? We'll just come over here. This is the place. All that time. That's 1830, man. 1831. That's going all the way back to the beginning of the church. The ritual abuse has been happening, and to young people, very young people. I had this. I saw this thing. I don't know how much truth there is to it. I haven't gone down this rabbit hole yet. Somebody said, "Oh, you remember Miranda Hyde Johnson?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course I remember Miranda Hyde Johnson." And everybody remembers Fanny Alger, allegedly both at one point wives of Joseph Smith when they were still teenage girls while he was living in Kirtland, Ohio. And somebody said, Miranda had a little sister who was 12 years old and moved into the Smith's home. But then she died mysteriously shortly thereafter. I'm like, I've been in this anti-Mormon business for a while. And this is the first time I'm hearing of this. Are you serious? That Miranda Johnson had a younger sister who died while working for the Smiths in the same capacity that Fanny Alger did? Oh man. I don't know. I'm gonna have to look into that. I hope it's not true. What a nightmare. In any event, it's going to be curious to see why Ken Krogh is so fixated on this couple and this housing development. I'm going to show you. I'm just going to show you one of the other things that I discovered while I was doing this. Let me see if I still have it in my downloads. Okay, yeah, here's one. Okay. I found this last week, and I've been running it around my sources saying, "What do you know about this?" And everybody I show this to goes, "What the hell?" I mean, like people who are involved in research about Operation Underground Railroad and Tim Ballard are shocked. Like this is real shit. This is like, wait a minute, there's more to this than we knew. Here's screen. Okay. So I'm just going to read this to you. Statement before the Spring City Board of Adjustments. Remember, I told you about the city, Spring City, Utah, little tiny town. People don't even know about it. Statement before the Spring City Board of Adjustments, October 2025. This is recent. Sonia Brown, citizen of Greater Spring City. As stated, regarding the violations of my right to speak in a July 2025 Spring City Planning and Zoning public meeting, I accept the training exercise which was conducted recently by LUDMA officials of all city employees as satisfaction of this unfortunate incident. I hope this will never happen to anyone else in our town or area. So this is a statement by this person, Sonia Brown. This is a little bit heartbreaking. I'm just going to warn you ahead of time. It's disturbing. I understand that there are penalties which could be placed upon City Councilman Marty McCain for his role in it, Kristen Mortensen because of her role, and Mike West for intentionally attempting to block me from speaking in a public hearing, but I do not wish for such steps to be taken. I ask that my statement regarding the harassment be placed officially on the record. So this woman's putting her name out there. She's throwing down the gauntlet here. I don't know much about each of these individuals, even so far as they have been mentioned here. But this struck me off into looking into things like the chief of police down there. Tonight, my main purpose in addressing the Spring City Board of Adjustments is to follow due process and make a record of the violation of my rights as a local citizen and someone who has been appointed and served on an official Spring City committee. I realize that none of you seated here tonight, you Bishop Clark or Ted or Aaron Sorensen or other members of this board, have not been a part of any of these activities. However, my counsel has asked that I make the following statement a part of the official record. May I proceed? On August 8th, 2025, I received a call from Spring City Police Chief Chad Huff, informing me that I had been I think that's a misspell, that I had been under investigation by Spring City for, quote, impersonating a city employee. I couldn't have been more shocked by this call or confused. Chief Huff explained to me that he had been directed by Councilman Ken Krogh to undertake an investigation of me based on some errant information he had personally obtained. Chief Huff was directed to request my emails from various private individuals, commercial companies, and government agencies to investigate whether I had somehow been, quote, impersonating a Spring City employee. Chief Huff quickly reassured me that he found no wrongdoing on my part. I was grateful to hear this and questioned him about why I would be targeted in this way. He told me that members of the city council had the impression that I was misrepresenting myself when reaching out to local engineering firms and the Utah League of Cities and Towns. I shared with Chief Huff that I had been asked by Planning and Zoning Commissioner Kay Van Buren to make a couple of calls and to try and locate a civil engineering firm which might be able to assist the Planning and Zoning Commission in undertaking an appropriate general plan for Spring City, which is one of its mandated state authorities and responsibilities. Kay Van Buren also encouraged me to locate funding sources so that if the Planning Commission decided to launch such an effort, there would be a possibility of funding in place. Because Kay Van Buren and I had served for 4 months on the Spring City Growth Committee, he knew that I had researched general plans and engineering and community planners. I agreed. I made exactly 2 phone calls, one to Jones and DeMille Engineering in Richfield, where I was immediately connected with their community planning coordinator, and one follow-up call to connect her with Kay Van Buren directly. I also sent a handful of emails exploring how a city or any city applies for grants to underwrite general plans. One went to the Utah League of Cities and Towns, but I never received any help from them. I explained this to Chief Huff, and he shared that he knew who I had contacted because he requested my emails from each of the sources where I had been in contact. I was, as any citizen would be, outraged to know that my reputation might be compromised by being the subject of a purported Spring City investigation, and to have my contacts solicited from my email communications as if I had committed a crime. Chief Huff reassured me that no wrongdoing was revealed whatsoever and the investigation was closed. But he added that he must warn me And he said this twice, and it felt like he was under pressure and that someone was joining him secretly on the call. I was confused by what he was warning me about to this day. Councilman Ken Krogh, I happen to know, has my telephone number in his phone and has called me personally on multiple occasions. I asked the chief why the city didn't just phone me first to inquire why I might be looking for information about general plans. I would have been very happy to explain my assignment from K. Van Buren. Councilman Ken Krogh chose not to make a simple phone call, to instead escalate an investigation where there was no cause. When a government begins to investigate its citizens unlawfully, that's when you know something is going very wrong at City Hall. I don't hold Chief Huff responsible. He was responding to his superiors, but I did request, which is my right, to receive the police report immediately. Chief Huff promised he would comply. Police reports are required by law to be available in 1 business day. I would wait 3 weeks for the report to come. Chief Huff understood that it had been sent, but apparently for some reason it was not. When I received it, it was clear to me that Ken Krogh and Randy Strait had been involved. By Utah State Code, no municipal council member has the authority to unilaterally launch an investigation on his own. This means multiple councilmen, or apparently the mayor, was involved in this illegal attempt to harass and intimidate me. Further, as I read the police report, which I have here in my hand, it became clear to me that the investigation was launched only 6 days after I was asked to provide documents and an affidavit for the Friends of Historic Spring City lawsuit against the city. This is sometimes referred to as witness tampering. I submitted my affidavit on July 23, 2025 to attorney Melanie Cook and had never been involved in the lawsuit whatsoever prior to that date. I still have not taken a role in the lawsuit against the city. Furthermore, just 6 days later, on July 29th, Ken Krogh launched his investigation. On July 30th, 2025, the very next day, I was intentionally blocked from speaking at the Spring City public hearing for Brian Allen, involving expansion of the light commercial zone of the Main Street Spring City. All of this was coordinated. All of this to deliberately intimidate someone whose views did not necessarily match the agenda of the city, or initiating an investigation, or holding the public hearing. This was a violation of my constitutional rights, open meeting laws, and LUDMA, the Utah land use laws, which govern hearings in municipalities involved in zoning and other public issues. I make this record this evening because a sophisticated attorney like Mayor Anderson knows that things like this should never go on in a city or a small town. Mayor Anderson was a witness to my intimidation and remained silent, never guided his council member or the members of his own city planning and zoning commission to conduct themselves appropriately. For me, this was very damaging. Attorney Lisa Baskin of Smith Hartvigsen and the Attorney General's office have received my complaint and are pursuing it. For this purpose, I make a record tonight. I was appointed to the board of Envision Utah by its funders, the Eccles family and the Beasley family. Envision Utah funds the Utah League of Cities and Towns to have my reputation casually abused this way by requesting my emails with absolutely no foundation is offensive and illegal. I make a record of this event to complement a complaint filed with the Utah Attorney General's office and the matter of defamation involving Councilman Krogh. Councilman Ken Krogh is being coordinated by the municipal law firm of Smith Hartvigsen in Salt Lake City. I hope no one, no woman particularly, will ever be treated like this again in Spring City. Thank you. Go Sonia. Allegedly. Jesus. I mean, good for her. Let me see if I can come up with a couple of these other documents here. I'm like, what else can I find if I dig a little more into this issue? And I found a couple other documents. Well, that's the deposition of John Lyons. Okay, here we go. This is another one that I found super interesting. I just know this is where I'm gonna get a little cease and desist order from somebody. But you know what? I'm just reading what's publicly available. I found this by Googling Ken Krog's name and said, I didn't know Ken Krog was a city councilman. That's interesting news. I punched in Ken Krog councilman and found this document published on the internet. Disclosure, compliance, conflict of interest under the Municipal Officers and Employees Ethics Act. Candidate and office holder, Kenneth Krog. Office, City Council. The names and addresses of each individual's current employers and names and addresses of each of the individual's employers during the preceding year. Now, mind you, my understanding is that Ken Krog has retired officially from working for InsideSales.com. But as recently as 2023, he represented the Spear Fund and Eternal Core. In other words, working with and for Tim Ballard and with and for Tom Harrison, who is Mr. Visions of Glory. Let's not call him Mr. Chad and Lori Daybell cult. Let's not call him Mr. Jody Hildebrandt cult. Let's not call him any of those things. Let's just call him Mr. Visions of Glory. How about that? The name and address. So current employers, it says self-employed, Results Consulting LLC. Okay. Sounds like a shell company. Okay. Previous employers, same. Okay. This is in. Did I have an ad? This had to have been last year because last year was when he was on city council. Okay. Curious. For each employer described in item 1, a brief description of the employment, including the individual's occupation and, as applicable, job title. Current employment, operational and management consulting. Previous employment, same. Okay. The name of any entity in which the individual is an owner or officer or was an owner or officer during the preceding year. Liberty and Light, DBA, the Spear Fund, Chairman, President, and San Pete Food Pantry, Board Member. Now that's curious because if I'm not mistaken, Liberty and Light is one of the companies, I'm not sure, but my understanding, if I remember correctly, it is one of the companies on the Tim Ballard secret whiteboard meeting. I'm going to have to validate that. I wasn't planning to do this tonight. I was planning to do it at a later time, but let's screw it. Let's do it while we're here. A brief description of the type of business or activity conducted by the entities. Liberty and Light, DBA, the Spear Fund, Chairman, nonprofit fight child trafficking. San Pete Food Pantry, board members fight hunger in San Pete County, Utah. Cool. Individuals' positions in the entities described in item 3. Liberty and Light, DBA, the Spear Fund, Chairman. San Pete Food Pantry, it's the same. The name of each individual from whom or entity from which the individual has received $5,000 or more in income during the preceding year. Liberty and Light, doing business as the Spear Fund, Chairman, Consultant, Nonprofit, Fight Child Trafficking. Which is curious. I'm not sure if... My understanding is that he is retired, is that Ken Krog either has an ownership stake or he sold his stake in InsideSales.com, which is a $1 billion company. It is extremely successful. This is why he's allegedly part of why he's involved in all of these things is because the man has millions of dollars. He also wrote articles for Forbes magazine about artificial intelligence, among other things, which is one of the reasons why I got interested in him when we were talking about Banjo. You guys remember last week we talked about Banjo? And I'm like, and it just so happens that Mr. Krogh happens to consider himself an expert on artificial intelligence. What are the chances that he's involved with this guy who was a, maybe nothing, who was a skinhead, Mr. Patton was a skinhead from out in Los Angeles when he was a kid and has allegedly been trying to get his life back together for 30 plus years. In any event, maybe he is, and maybe good for him. Name of each entity in which the value holds any stocks or bonds having a fair market value of $5,000 or more as of the date of the disclosure from or during the preceding year, excluding funds that are managed by a third party, including blind trusts, managed investment accounts, and mutual funds. Zip. Is it possible that all of Mr. Krogh's wealth is either spent or in mutual funds or something? Like he doesn't get anything he doesn't have any dispersals from this company. Okay, I guess it's possible. A brief description of the type of business or activity conducted by the entities described in item 8. There is nothing in item 8, so nothing. The name of each entity or organization described in items 2 through 9 of this form in which the individual currently serves or served in the preceding year on the board of directors or in any other type of paid leadership capacity. So, and again, nothing. They wasn't on the board or in any or serving in any capacity in the last year, in the previous year. So this is 2025. So since 2024, that he hadn't actually held any position of leadership in the Spear Fund. There's no mention at all of Eternal Core. This is weird, man. A brief description of the type of business or activity conducted by the entities or organizations described in item 10. There are no items. There are no entities. Description of, I'll just give you the brief rundown. It's like nothing else. Now you get down all the way down to number 15, names of individual spouse or any other adult residing in the individual's household. Crystal Krogh, his wife. Other adults, none. For individual spouse, names of and addresses of their current employers and employers in the last year, not applicable. A brief description of the employment and occupation of each adult who resides in the individual's household, none. And then it says optional, a description of any other matter or interest that the individuals may constitute a conflict of interest. Nothing. So this is why it's curious. Signed dated 1/23, January 23rd, 2025. I regulate office holder. The regulate office holder or candidate believe this form is true and accurate to the best of my knowledge. Kenneth Krogh. And so the thing that makes this curious to me is that for a man who's as deeply involved in zoning and the future of zoning and construction of new housing in the city where he lives, to get so involved that that a woman actually files a formal complaint about him having the police track down and contact all the people she might be emailing and ask them to turn over emails she may be sending related to work that she was apparently assigned by a member of the zoning and planning committee of the city to report that no, I work in fighting trafficking with fighting child trafficking through a Spear Fund. Oh, great! What position have you had in the last year? None. I didn't work at it. Oh, well, you worked at self-employed through Results Consulting. Yeah. What position do you have? None. Weird, dude. This is weird. And it just keeps on going. Let's see here. Let me see if I can find the other one. I found one more that I thought was super strange. It's a Sonia statement. That's John Smith lectures. I've stumbled upon a new theory that I'm going to be seeing if I can publish it in the upcoming thing, in an upcoming dialogue journal about Korihor. Let me see if I can find it real quick here. Krog City Council minutes. This one was just strange. Yeah, I think this is it. The more that I look into this shit, the more it's like, oh, wait, there's that name again. And what are they doing? This is weird. Okay. I think this is it. Is this it? There was something about a truck. Yeah, is this it? Okay. You guys remember? Well, I'll just read it to you. Here, let me show it to you. So I decided to look at what's normal business for Spring City City Council. And luckily, they had city minutes published. Spring City Council minutes, November 6th, 2025. So this is after that complaint by Sonia that Ken Krogh basically, she suspects, made a three-way call listening to the chief of police for the city basically berating her for sticking her nose where it doesn't belong where it comes to planning and zoning, while she explains to him over and over again, and he tells her, well, you didn't technically do anything wrong. And she's like, yeah, I didn't do anything wrong. I was asked by Kay Van Buren to look into developing the city. And yes, maybe I had something to do with friends from Friends of Historic Spring City filing a lawsuit against the city, but that shouldn't have anything to do with anything. My understanding, I may have this wrong, is that Friends of Spring City is an entity connected to, or maybe even run by, Joe and Lee Benyon, basically suing Ken Krogh to keep him off their ass. I don't know if that's the same lawsuit. I don't know that that's the case. Either that or they're trying to develop this housing commission, and Joe and Lee Benyon maybe are connected to it in some way. And that's what I'm trying to figure out at this point. Anybody else who wants to help me out, I do have a very busy schedule. I'll take all the research I can get. So, okay, but anyways, Spring City Council minutes. Remember the names you were hearing a minute ago. This meeting was held in Council Room of Spring City Hall, blah, blah, blah. Person in attendance, Allison Anderson, Christy McGriff, Kat Caldwell, James Baker, Becky Brunner, Tom Brunner, Mike Nelson, Maureen Clark, Kay Van Buren, Yvonne Wright, Kent Comer. That's unfortunate. Power Superintendent, Marie Cornwell, Michael Broadbent, Suzanne Broadbent, Robert Buckner, Nick Peterson, Kevin Christensen, Jane Hawks, Glenn Finn, Mickey Calderwood, Sorolla Calderwood, Cade Penny, R6 Representative Chad Huff. Remember that? That was the chief of police. Chad Huff, chief of police, Whit Allred, treasurer Ruth Ann McCain, recorder. Okay. Zoom attendants, Suzanne Dean, Craig Paulson, Mike Tullis, Ben Hanks, Laurel Workman, Andrew Hanks, Melanie Cook, which is another name that had come up in that we talked about. Pledge of Allegiance by Chris Anderson, that's the mayor. Expression of Choice, Tom Brunner. Roll call, Marty McCain, Ken Krogh, Chris Anderson, Courtney Syme, and Paul Penrod, etc. Anyways, it's all here. Ken Krogh, council member Ken Krogh stated that his items are on the agenda. Council member Courtney Syme stated that we've entered interlocal agreement for our youth recreation programs, blah, blah, blah. Kay Van Buren stated that his comments are related to the Planning Commission meeting. There have been 2 applications for subdivisions of half-acre lots. A subdivision application had right-of-way streets at 38 feet, and our city code states at 82 and a half feet is needed for road right-of-ways. Mr. Van Buren stated that this is an extreme difference. When he brought this up in the Planning Commission meeting, he was told that this was agreed on in the annexation agreement. Mr. Van Buren read a part of the variance ordinance and asked if the Board of Adjustments gave a variance for the road right-of-way for the subdivision. His concern is that the road going east will be dramatically smaller if it goes from 82 feet to 38 feet. Mr. Van Buren would like to challenge the legality of allowing the annexed area to have 38-foot roads. So something's going on about that. They're trying to plan traffic around housing where they are, multiple unit housing. Cami Christensen stated that she wanted to express disapproval of Councilman Marty McCain. Remember, that's another name that had come up, who is the liaison for the Planning Commission. At the last commission meeting, he sat on the stand and she felt that it was inappropriate and misleading as he is the liaison, which keeps both the City Council and Planning Commission informed of current projects and assists in any discussion and research that supports the decision-making process. I mean, there's just like all this infighting as this little city. State sales for the park. Robert Buckner, Veterans Day. Trying to find, let's see here. Okay, here's that. Councilmember Ken Krogh stated that historically Kent Cummer has dealt with trees that interfere with power lines. There is supposed to be a 12-foot easement between power lines and trees. Nick Peterson with Tree Works and Kent, 2 experts, explained that what was being considered. Kent Cummer stated that in the past he has been able to keep up with the tree trimming, and so far there have not been any major problems with trees falling. This is like, it's like the most normal stuff to go on is the whole point. And yet, just a few weeks before this had happened, these people had been all embroiled in this huge scandal in which Ken Krogh was accusing 2 people who are in the Planning and Zoning Committee. Let me see if I can find that here. Yeah, this is a different minutes. So Joe and Lee Benyon, the point is this. Joe and Lee Benyon are in this like planning committee. And I'm not sure if it's an elected position or what, but apparently they're involved in this developing new real estate and all this infighting over road sizes and power lines and things like this. It all has to do with the development of new property for zoning for housing, and just happens to be coming about at the same time Ken Krogh gets himself put onto the city council, which by the way he's out of now from what I understand. And at the same time that he is holding protests or some kind of demonstrations near the Benyon's office, their work, demonstrating against them, claiming that they're the leaders of the LDS Church of Satan and that they abused all these children and fed them into ovens and burned them alive in their kiln. And it's just like, what in the world? What? And then it's just like, oh, can we talk about trimming these damn trees? Want to talk about the one that I had read earlier last week was Ken Krogh went on this rant about we think the guy who runs cargo for the city says that the truck that we have is really old and run down and it's not going to make it much longer. We should buy another one. We think that we should assign somebody to go up to Utah County where they have good deals on used trucks and see if we could get a good deal on a truck. And it's like, the fuck are you talking about, man? What happened to? Oh, do you know these two people are feeding children into ovens on the property? It's like, you want to talk about the trucks, man? They just like send somebody and say, just buy a truck, man. What are you talking about? It's like, but apparently he has a court order saying, leave these people alone. Anyways, we live in a weird world, you guys. You guys want to hear something dark? Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll save it for another day. It's 1:30 a.m. You guys want to see something dark? Okay. This is going to be vile. Yeah, this is going to be vile. This may be where some of you want to check out for the night. Is that the way we do this? Maybe from now on. Okay, so I got sidetracked onto rabbit holing this story. I'm gonna load a video here, but it's like mainly just a way of like quickly getting through a bunch of documents. Okay, so get this. So this that you're looking at is sadly the obituary and condolences on one of these funeral websites, right? For a young man by the name of Guy Clancy Rinderknecht, right? And sadly, young guy apparently was in a car accident. It sounds like it's involving drinking and driving. I'm not sure if with him or if he was the one drinking or somebody else, but in any event, he passed in a car accident. This is in 2015, I believe. Is that there? 2013. Okay. Now this is gonna get weird and gross. So you've been forewarned. Standard stuff. Young man lost his life. Survived by this family, who are all, of course, very much begrieved. This is the reason why I found it here, why it became important. Okay. Is that I scrolled down, I'm like, what does that have to do with Gina Nelson? If you read this, it says, let me see if I can actually zoom in on this. There's this comment from March 24th, 2013 by Gina Nelson. It says, Clancy came with Dave to the gym several times, and I had the opportunity of coaching him. He was strong, athletic, eager, so eager to learn, full of love of life. Ugh. And learning, and he was a great athlete. He had a willing spirit. Nowadays, it is hard to find youth that are teachable and meek, but Clancy was, and because of his unassuming and friendly and grateful attitude, he was an absolute delight to have around. Sheesh, I will miss that kid. Surely miss him. Surely will miss him. Okay? Was everybody able to hear me while I was reading that? I think it should. The audio probably does. I think the audio continues while I'm doing that. Okay, so this is an obituary. Sounds like a very lovely thing to say about a person. You may have noticed me icking as I was reading it. You're gonna figure out why here pretty soon. So that's Gina Nelson offering her condolences on the passing of this young man. Now here's another one that came up in the search, strangely enough, on the same site. And once again, obituaries of another person. This time is a Mark Kenning. standard, obituary stuff. Mark loved the Lord, his heavenly Father, and like both of these are LDS people who passed, and their funerals were being arranged for the stake center, and typical Mormon family business up in Cache County, Utah. And then you see this business, bottom left-hand corner here. You have this post here. Let me take this other thing down. By Claire and Gina Nelson. Okay. Remember that name. Says Mark was the best man at our wedding in May of 1979. Although we'd lost track of each other, we are planning on getting together this we were planning on getting together this summer over a picnic, and we were so looking forward to rekindling our friendship. We were deeply saddened by the news of his untimely death, but thankful and grateful for the knowledge of eternal life that comes from. I can't read the rest because it's blocked on my side. On my side, something gospel something, right? Okay. Typical Mormon condolences from Gina Nelson and her husband Claire Nelson. Here's another one. So those were, I think one was from 2013. The other one I think was from like 2015. This one's 2019. Judge Nelson releases Gina Nelson from jail, giving credit for time served. This is 4 years. This is just a few years later. Okay. Logan, a judge has released Gina Nelson from jail, sentencing the 61-year-old Providence woman for the time she has already served after being convicted of failing to register as a sex offender. Judge Kevin Allen expressed appreciation for her willingness to converse with him after previously taking her into custody for defiant outbursts in the courtroom. Nelson appeared in First District Court Wednesday morning to determine whether she was competent to stand trial. The hearing was scheduled after the court ordered she be evaluated by a psychologist. Judge Allen ruled Nelson was competent even though she had refused to cooperate with the doctor's evaluation. He said the court has observed the defendant over the years and read the filings that she has filed. Nothing in that leads me to believe that she is incompetent. Okay. Well, so Gina Nelson, she's been in some kind of trouble, and she's back in it, and but it appears the judge is releasing her from it. Well, okay, well let's keep on trucking, learn a little bit more. Judge Allen ruled Nelson was competent even though she refused to cooperate. Oh yeah, we just read that. Nelson's behavior was noticeably different Wednesday. She apologized for her previous demeanor and explained the situation had been difficult and gone way and beyond reasonable bounds. She said, I don't want to continue to wear each other out. I know I have been convicted of these charges, but only God knows my heart. The defendant later expressed hope of seeing her family again, noting she missed spending the holidays with them while incarcerated in Box Elder County Jail. She went on to tell the court, I am very tired and beat down. I never had any intention of running amok. Judge Allen also expressed exhaustion, noting that the defendant and those supporting her had filed over 500 pages of documents in her defense. These are people writing to say, can you please just leave this woman, let her go, leave her, she's done her time, and just, let her, whatever her crime, just let it, you don't have to keep beating her down with this. State Attorney Jacob Gordon agreed that the case had been a long haul. He reminded the court it had been 15 months since Nelson was found guilty of failing to disclose her social media her social media accounts and work at a gym in her sex offender registry. He said, I am grateful to hear that she is accepting responsibility for this. I hope she has learned her lesson and won't have this problem moving forward. Again, this is in 2019. In October, Nelson was removed from the courtroom and taken into custody after she refused to approach the stand during her sentencing on 3 counts of failing to register as a sex offender, a third-degree felony. There were 2 similar outbursts later in the month and again in November. During Tuesday's court appearance, Nelson acknowledged that she didn't know the law as she tried to represent herself. She said the last several years had been a learning experience. Judge Allen said he had tried to respect her rights and follow the law as best he could. He sentenced Nelson to serve 90 days in jail, but ordered her to be released immediately, giving her credit for time she'd already served. He also placed her on probation for 1 year and ordered her to write a study of what the sex offender registry rules require. Okay? So it keeps going. All right, here's another one. This one goes way back. Okay, this one goes all the way back to 2002. So it started out in 2013. Trust me, you're seeing it as I discovered it. Okay, I started into this. Suffice it to say, I had looked it up while I was watching Shiny Happy People. I was hearing a lot of stuff that sounded very familiar to me about this Reverend Gothard. And went, God, it's like growing up in the Kimber camp, right? I grew up, as many of you know, in the Mormon equivalent of Shiny Happy People, sort of. And there were instances, as I understand it, that seem localized to families, but I can't help but wonder of abuse that happened in the Skousenite camp with Glenn Kimber, his son-in-law. And I don't know. I'm not saying Dr. Kimber is involved in anything, but I've heard things over the years, and I'm like, boy, I wonder if there's like a case waiting to be cracked here of people who went to Benjamin Franklin Academy like I did, and or got involved in the Skousenite world and were abused in the way that like these Duggar kids were inside, and you know, other people inside their organization, the IBLP or whatever. I looked it up. I'm like, Kimber Academy, and apparently this is part of that, a part of one person's abuse. And I just kind of went down a rabbit hole and said, well, I don't know how much this has to do with Kimber or Skousen, but geez, this is a weird story. Ex-coach sentenced to prison for sex abuse. It's not pretty. This is in 2002. After months of angry finger pointing and controversy surrounding a 17-month-old sexual abuse case, Logan resident Gina Nilsson was sentenced to prison for molesting a 12-year-old boy in the mid-90s. First District Court Judge Clint S. Judkins ordered Nilsson to spend 1 to 15 years in prison on each of 2 second-degree felony charges of sexual abuse of a child. He also ordered Nilsson to pay a $2,000 fine for each charge and an undetermined amount of restitution to the victim. Nilsson pleaded guilty to fondling and performing oral sex on the boy at least twice between 1994 and October 1995. He was originally charged with 5 counts of sodomy of a child and 1 count of aggravated sexual assault of a child. All were first-degree felonies. During sentencing Monday, Judkins addressed a packed courtroom of people both supporting and opposing Nilsson. Be assured the offenses as charged have occurred, Judkins says. Mrs. Nilsson pleaded guilty to them. Last month, Nilsson's husband, Claire... Oh, wait. I've chosen to put, quote from her, I've chosen to put myself at the mercy of the court and in the hands of God. I'm sorry. I'm so ashamed, says Nilsson. Last month, Nilsson's husband, Claire, sent a letter to an unknown number of LDS ward members and friends in which he called the victim of the abuse a self-indulgent and pushy individual who took advantage of Gina's vulnerability to help people. Claire also asked those individuals to write letters to Judkins on Gina's behalf. The Judkins is the judge. Reminder. The court received more than 125 letters in the first 2 weeks. About 1/5 were from youth under the age of 18. However, some community members were appalled by the letter writing campaign. More than a dozen emails and letters were sent to the Herald Journal stated that Claire's campaign was inappropriate, that he shouldn't have asked church members to participate in the campaign considering the nature of the charges, and that Gina pleaded guilty to molesting the boy. Cache County and Attorney Scott Wyatt agreed, calling the letter writing campaign outrageous. I found it extremely offensive, he says, second only to the original abuse. Wyatt said he was pleased with Judkin's sentence, although he had argued for a consecutive prison term instead of a concurrent one. This isn't someone who has a casual problem, Wyatt said. She needs some serious help with skills to control herself. As late as last Friday, there were reports of minors attending a party at Nilsson's home. Wyatt said Nilsson is under court order not to have contact with anyone under the age of 18 except her own children. Judkins denied attorney Shannon Demler's request to have Nilsson sentenced to a strict counseling program where she could get additional mental health treatment. We would have liked her to go to a program rather than prison, Demler said. I thought that would be a good resolution because she's doing so good in her counseling. That would have allowed her to continue to make progress, where prison may be a setback to the progress she's been making. The victim's father in the case asked the court to sentence Gina to prison at least long enough for her to complete psychosexual therapy. He also asked that she be ordered to complete 100 hours of community service upon release. At the time of the abuse, I believed in the goodness of mankind, and I couldn't believe Gina could have systematically damaged a child, the father said. I submit my opinion that Gina is not as vulnerable as she's portrayed. Gina was not forced to do these things, Your Honor, not even encouraged. Wyatt said Monday that Gina was responsible for abusing other alleged victims, but they had been too scared to come forward because of the media attention. We have confirmed multiple victims, he said. We've confirmed multiple victims, he said. Information about other alleged victims was contained in one of Gina's diaries and entered into evidence in a preliminary hearing earlier this year, Wyatt said. Wyatt went on to say that Gina's apology Monday, although a step in the right direction, was only words. It's kind of like being a drunk who says it was never my intention to take a drink, but continues to go to the bar every night, Wyatt said. Gina said in court that she had suffered through a lot of emotional and mental abuse from past relationships. She also said her apology to the victim was not meant to justify her actions, but merely to help people to understand her thinking at the time. Gina was scheduled to be transported to the Utah Department Corrections Facility sometime Monday or today. Okay. Now, here's another document. You see that at the top it says Gina C. Nilsson. Notice demand to amend with no delay has been made. And then you're going to see several of the names at the top of the matter are names that you just are several names the judges involved, like Judge Judkins and Judge Allen, and then etc. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It says you are hereby notified that a demand to delay has been made to the Utah statewide common law grand jury for the multiple constitutional crimes Dason tort, which means of their own wrong committed by the de facto selected and appointed officers of the United States of America for remedy to my deprived constitutional unalienable rights. It's a little difficult to read. Attached to 11/23/2018, demand with no delay. So this is right around the time when we had to deal with, where they apparently had to deal with her mumbling to herself and refusing to cooperate in the courtroom. I, Gina C. Nilsson, under penalty of perjury, declare the foregoing is true and correct. Executed this 10th day of December 2018. PA Bonnie Nilsson on behalf of Gina C. Nilsson. Basically, in summary, this is filed on the behalf of Gina C. Nilsson, in which she basically explains that the police and the judge have violated her rights by arresting her and engaging in search and seizure on her property, taking stuff that belongs to her, etc. Basically basic police investigation stuff. But yeah, so it appears to be signed by her and a paralegal, if I'm not mistaken, and then what do you call it? Notarized. Okay. Gonna go back again, back to 2001. Again, you're just seeing these in the order that I found them. Husband stands by coach. This is way back in 2001, before she's sentenced to for her crimes. Let's see here. Whoops. Whoops. A weeping, rocking Gina Nilsson appeared in court Wednesday to face 5 counts of sodomy. Whoops, sorry. Okay, the husband of an award-winning boys gymnastics coach and anti-abortion activist charged with felony sex abuse of a young boy says her family still loves her. A weeping, rocking Gina Nilsson appeared in court Wednesday to face 5 counts of sodomy on a child and 1 count of aggravated sex abuse of a child, all first-degree felonies. Claire Nilsson later made a statement outside the courthouse in which he said the charges do not diminish the validity of her pro-life beliefs. Gina has been an outspoken opponent of abortion for many years in northern Utah. She has written regular letters to the editor in which she condemns the practice. The whole story is, besides being just tragic, it's like a big long lesson in really now, guys, like right now is now the time for this. Really? Because it just feels like this is not the situation to say, does the world not have enough babies? The world doesn't have enough little boys and girls. It's like, really, Gina? Right now? Right now, girl? It's like, would get a public defender. My gosh. Okay. Claire Nielsen said, let's see. This wrong does not minimize her stance on abortion, which she's had all her life. Her position is correct, and it remains correct, regardless of the outcome of this trial, Claire said. Why are you connecting those things, guy? Claire Nielsen said even though he in no way condones the allegations, as atrocious as they are, he will remain supportive. The right thing to do to someone who is down is give them a hand up, he said. I mean, he's not wrong, but right now is just now? Really? Claire said that there are probably thousands of people whose lives have been brightened and improved because of his wife. Okay, sure. I hope they come forward and let her know, he said. I hope and pray she's not crucified in court. There are situations that I hope come to light during this case. Of course, it is devastating. It is devastating to my children. It is devastating to the thousands of other people she had helped over the years. A mother of 6, Nelson, 44, has been in the Cache County jail since she was arrested Friday. In First District Court Wednesday, Gina sat alone, rocking, talking to herself, and wiping away tears. She did not say anything as her attorney, Shannon Demler, asked the case to be continued until 9 a.m. Monday. I want to make sure that everything's in line before we continue, Demler said later. There might be some mental issues and other things. Bail was briefly discussed, and Judge Clint Judkins ordered it set at $70,000. It has not yet been posted. The case came to light after the alleged victim told authorities Nilsson started abusing him when he was 12 or 13, and he was an acquaintance of hers. He later became her gymnastics student. Gina was named the Utah Boys Gymnastics Coach of the Year in March. The young man went back to talk to Nilsson last month while the case was under investigation, according to court documents. She told him her involvement with him stopped because she was repenting and wanted to go to the temple with her son, who was getting ready to leave on a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. When Logan police searched the home, they found a diary the young man had talked about. Gina had written his name in the book along with the description of the abuse, police said. Cache County Attorney Scott Wyatt said other names were written in the book. His office might be contacting other potential victims. He declined to say how many names were in the book. When Logan, let's see here. Other victims might come forward, he said. You never really know in a case like this. Friends at the hearing expressed their support and said Nielsen was a fantastic coach and a success at everything she tried. Now, Mormons, come on now. Right now. She's a success at everything she tries. Look how good she was at abusing children. that's that tenacious go get them spirit. About 35 family and friends of Nielsen were in court Wednesday before being led away. She looked at the crowd for the first time and then focused on her family, giving them a huge grin. Oh, good for her. Good for you. Keep your spirits up. Anyway, so I didn't capture this because it was around this time that I went, do I even want to go over this story? I mean, the whole thing started with, I've often wondered how many people were abused in the BFA/Kimber Academy system that I don't know about. And I decided to look it up. I did find a couple of like Reddit posts and stuff where people posted something about, is nobody going to talk about what happened at BFA? I didn't witness any real abuse, but I can see it happening. And I'm like, yeah. I bet you if I floated out there, we find out how many kids in the Skousenite world, because so much about this, what this Gothard guy said and did with the curriculum at IBLP, that was totally the National Center for Constitutional Studies. That was totally like some of the things that he said and did could have been taken right out of Skousen books. And I don't think even most people who like Skousen know. First of all, a lot of people who like Skousen Cleon Skousen don't even know he was Mormon. They don't know that he and his son-in-law started a school. And they don't know that there was some pretty skeezy stuff going on, at least financially and stuff with the school. In any event, the doctrines and the things we were taught in those schools, they were like some white nationalist stuff. They were pretty scary. They weren't, it's easy for me now to look back on that and say, man, what the hell was that? But it was like, anyway, so I found this one, and this woman, she's got her community divided. So I didn't capture this, but there was another report involving her failing to register as an offender. What had happened was, apparently, that she had made parole, and then her daughter, who owns the gym, the boys' gymnastics gym, had her come back on board at the gym and volunteer, and then she like paid her on the side or something. So like officially she was volunteering, but like I'm not sure about that, about paying her on the side. But I'm pretty sure that the whole idea was supposed to be to come up with a way to get her some money and to support herself doing what she does best, which is coaching boys gymnastics. And then lo and behold, somebody happened to say, wait a minute, didn't that woman go to prison for touching a boy in the 90s for touching while she was coaching them? And then looked it up and said, well, it's not listed in her sex offender registry, and none of us were notified that our kids were being coached by a sex offender. who abused children while she was coaching them, and pleaded guilty to it. What? And so they reported it, and then she ended up back in court apparently over that. And the report I'd read, it mentioned her daughter's name, and she's like, she's a good coach. I don't know what to tell you. We needed a good coach. She was a good coach. She doesn't, and she said something like she doesn't deserve to have to pay for the rest of her life for the mistakes she made like 30 years ago. It's like, excuse me? Okay. And then there was this trial, and she's sitting in front of Judge Allen in Cache County there, and she's got all these people behind her smiling, and she's like smiling and waving at them, and they're smiling and waving at her. She's so sweet. She said, "It's like what? Right now, Mormons? Are you serious?" So in any event, I haven't managed to secure yet whether or not this person went back to prison, but I'm banking so far on that no. But the thing that really got me about it, and I'm like, I don't know that this fits in with any of my stories I'm following. It's just a good story. It's just a good case of looking at and saying, man, Utah's weird, man. That's some weird stuff. I mean, she abused those little boys, but she, her lime jello is off the charts. The carrot shavings, craisins. Anyway, it's a wild story, man. Anyway, I'm gonna let you guys go. We're gonna close up now with Chief Mitiga's favorite godless hymn. I'm not gonna be back on Friday. Probably I might jump in for a minute, depending on whether or not I have a date. Might have a date in Arizona. I might. I don't know. But if I do, it'll probably be very briefly. But definitely on Sunday. Definitely on Sunday. Otherwise, on Friday, I am meeting up with the one and only Beth Magnetic from Mormon True Crime. We're going to try at least, and as her schedule permits and mine, to get together and talk about the developments on some of the cases that we were working on together, and for her to update us on what's going on with her. Her whole life has kind of gone topsy-turvy, but it's looking like things are looking up for her. I'm hopeful. So, in any event, until next time, my friends, remember to flash bright. We are the Church of Korihor, spiritual community for godless people. And must always remember to look up.
Up here, looking down on you, I wish you could see our oasis so blue. We were all born here, unsure what that means. Our petty borders and wars don't mean a damn thing. A hateful world can feel so crowded now that I'm up here all alone. I wish you all could see you've forgotten your home. Look up, these stars are just the sea. Look up, stay the course with me. Look up, every river, every creature running wild, born our sacred mother's child. This place is our only home. you forget the hand that feeds you?